So now streaming this. And we're also now recording. And
Right.
this is
Ready?
one moment. Okay, we're ready.
Lovely. Welcome one and all to the February 23rd UID RB meeting. Hopefully you're in the right spot. I shall swear in city staff. You swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Wonderful. Let's call the roll.
Yes. Mr. Fleming will be here at some point. Ms. Gunselman? Here. Ms. Jones? Here. Ms. Parker? Here. Mr. Reeds?
Here.
Mr. Suplet?
Here.
Mr. Szymanski?
Present.
We have a quorum.
Let's see. Is there anyone here that wishes to speak from the visiting public about a case tonight? Just to get a sense of one person? Okay, we'll get to you as soon as we get to the case. Did everyone have an opportunity to review the minutes from last month?
Yes.
Any revisions, any changes, any comments? No?
I move that we approve the minutes from this week.
I'll second that.
Ms. Gunselman?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Reeds?
Abstain?
Mr. Suplet?
Yes.
And then Mr. Szymanski?
Yes.
Thank you.
First case, UID 22-12-002, 43 East 14th Avenue.
Yes. Okay, great. So 43 East 14th Avenue is a contributing residential structure significantly modified with an addition in 1960. The applicant is seeking board approval to construct a new egress staircase on the west elevation. Plans include two new half-light door openings, one in the existing masonry wall on the second floor and one using an existing window opening on the third floor. The staircase will be steel, painted or powder coated black, and the proposed stairs will satisfy building code requirements to change the use from apartments to a sorority. The applicant last came before the board in December of 2022, where the board expressed concerns about the proposed stairs abutting the property line as well as the stair orientation. The board also stated concerns about the ramp and its orientation and accessibility. The board recommended that the stairs be redesigned so that the orientation is easily accessible, consider a roof covering for the stairs, and that the ramp be designed so it meets ADA access standards. In response to board feedback, the applicant flipped the stairs and slid the ramp towards 14th to allow for more ease of access from the street-facing side of the building. Submitted materials include existing site photos, site plan, floor plan, elevation, stair section, stair plan, stair details, and exterior door cut sheet. And then if you go to those here, this is a photo, we all saw this last time. Just some existing site photos. This is where the stairs proposed to be located, as well as the ramp. Another shot of that. And then here with the plans, you can see the site plan here showing the area. And then looking at this floor plan here, you can see how the stairs flip. So now when you, I guess, walk up this drive, you'll approach the base of the stairs instead of having to go around. You can see that there's now space. There's about, I think that's 2 feet of space between the edge of the stair and the property line. And then there's, some changes to the ramp as well. Here we just have more stair plans. And then here is the elevation, and this elevation also includes the ramp as well. And then we have sections for the stairs, and then, the cut sheets for those doors, which are the same as last time. So after review, the proposal is generally consistent with the recommendations of the University District Plan. The plan recommends that the scale of additions is compatible with those of contributing buildings, and that original architectural features such as windows be maintained. As the proposed staircase is in scale with the structure and does not impact existing architectural features, staff supports the proposal and recommends. Thank you.
Thank you. You were the applicant, yes?
Yes.
Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Do you have anything you'd like to add to the city's review?
I think Belka's pretty much presented everything we're doing. we would have preferred not to have had added the stair, but building code requires us to have that extra exterior egress, so trying to keep it as compact and tucked away as much as we can and still provide what we have to.
Okay. Any questions or comments or concerns?
I have a question. There was some comments from the last time about adding a roof to the stairwell.
I guess it was asked whether we needed to or not. We don't need to, but we're gonna make sure, you know, treads, it'll be like sort of a nice looking grate, so water and snow doesn't gather on there.
That's my question.
Safety is critical, so it's important that it gets done.
There's existing railings on the front elevation of a stair leading up to the house. Are there any other railings on the house as they exist right now that we?
Down to that.
Yeah, keep going.
We will, because of the ramp, that railing will get replaced to match the stair.
I guess my concern is that I want everything to be so that we don't have 3 different railing types. On the property.
Just to be clear, the railing on the ramp is going to match the railing on the stairs, which is on the landings and all that.
Yes, yeah, we'll make sure everything is produced so it all matches.
I think this will flow better with the stairs now being able to.
It definitely does, yes.
So it, design wise, that makes a lot more
I have
sense.
to admit, we were rushing, and once that was sort of brought to my attention, I was kind of like, oh. So, yeah, to make sense.
And the door color is gonna match the front door, do you think?
Yes, yeah, I think we're just gonna have just a white front door, and those doors will match in color as well.
Anything, Keone?
Looks pretty plain and simple, or everything's okay. I'm good.
Okay. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Ms. Gunzelman,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Reed,
Yes.
Mr. Suplet,
Yes.
Mr. Szymanski.
Yes.
Right, that passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck. I'll be in touch, Ken.
That brings us to UID 22-01-010, 1812 North High Street.
Okay, so 1812 North High Street is an undeveloped lot here at the corner of North High Street and East 14th Avenue. The applicant is seeking board approval to develop a lot with a 32-space surface parking lot, which is intended to be temporary. The parking lot will be accessed via an interior private alley on the north and be screened per code using trees and shrubs on the south and east frontages. Ornamental aluminum fencing will also be provided on the south frontage. An existing crane pad surrounded with mesh chain link fencing will remain on the site, and bicycle parking is incorporated into the larger development plan. And I forgot to include this, but the applicant did present this to the board last month.
Well, the applicant is here on behalf of campus partners.
Yes.
Okay. Gonna be outside.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
You're recusing yourself.
Yeah, I'm recusing myself.
All right, thank you. So the applicant was here at the board in January of 2023, and board comments generally had some pause and some concern about the parking with regards to the location of it, the size of the lot, views to the WOSU building. There was one board member that voiced that it would be an improvement to the site as it exists today, given that the site's just currently gravel. But those were some opinions that were shared. And so in response to board comments, the plan is the same as last month. However, the applicant did include a context memo, I guess, of sorts here. Just explaining, the larger context of the parking and addressing some things there regarding bike parking and landscaping and alternative locations that were looked at for this parking lot. So I won't read that word for word, but it's there for your reference. And then in looking at their materials, you have what we saw last month. So here shows locations of the bike parking. And then further down, we have material details. And then here is the site plan for the parking lot itself. And then there's also a landscape plan further down showing the screen. So after staff review, the proposal is generally consistent with the recommendations of the University District Plan. The plan recommends that structured parking be located within the regional mixed-use corridors, that bicycle parking be provided, that parking be located to the rear of buildings, and that parking adjacent to public rights-of-way be screened as required by code. Although the proposed law is not structured parking, staff recognizes that the parking is accessed via an interior alley, is screened by code, and that the bicycle parking is a part of the larger development plan near the proposed lot. So as such, planning generally supports the proposal and recommends approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Assuming there will be additional commentary, would you be so kind as to state? You swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Lovely. Do you have any additional comments?
I just want to state, this was intended to be temporary parking. We looked at other options presented by the board, location-wise, one being the wedge lot, and looking at that access to that specific parcel would be difficult to rearrange the existing infrastructure that was there. So we thought that keeping it on the proposed location provides the least impact to the overall development plan and will allow for the continued development of University Square as intended through our master plan. And once the hotel and garage parking is developed, we will continue to work on permanent redevelopment of this particular site.
So I wasn't here last month, and I'm curious, can you define what temporary means? I mean, do you have a sense of what the duration of this?
It's hard to tell right now.
Okay.
But we are actively working towards
Finishing the project?
finishing the project, of course. That is our goal. And as I stated last time, we've got the economics of keeping this as a parking lot do not work for us. We've got land holding costs that we need to take in consideration, and
Yeah.
parking lot doesn't solve that problem.
Any questions?
As I read your additional comments, we're still looking at grass as in the area for planting. And I understand the point that more elaborate landscaping sort of contradicts the temporary nature. But I'm wondering, is there some, and I'm no expert in plant materials, is there some something in between that's a little more interesting without getting into landscaping that suggests permanent status?
Sure. We looked into that, planting something that is more native or taller maybe, but there were concerns around safety of the site, being able to see in and through it, and then just being able to maintain it properly. Just getting trash out of there is going to be a concern. Reasons why across the street at the Lexington Center, they always mow down the grass in the raised planters. because it collects a lot of garbage.
And you did mention in your updated information that the lawn that you anticipate wouldn't require the same kind of care that I'm assuming you're comparing to something like the oval. Can you specify a little bit more what that means? So, we're all on the same page that lawn is not a great solution to urban
Sure.
space or anything. So the questions around what other potential material could serve your need, be affordable, be changeable over time, that whole set of questions, I think, is what comes up. And for your specification, that this won't be needing to be maintained like other lawn. Can you say a little bit more about what that means here?
Yeah, just a standard ground cover mix, probably mostly ryegrass, something that's not your. very
Kentucky bluegrass?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, blue fescue or whatever.
No need for Scots lawn.
Yeah,
Currently.
Yeah, but our current wedge lot that's there is covered in the same material. Once a month, we'll obviously water it to get it established, but after that, minimal
Around.
maintenance.
And it drains better than gravel, obviously.
No puddles there.
Yeah, and again, I'm kind of disappointed by the lack of creativity. You did due diligence to indicate that you looked at the things we had suggested last week, but we made pretty minimal offerings because it's not our area or our job. And with the amount of space that Campus Partners commands in the area, it just seems like, what are there, 32 parking spaces in that area? And we understand the proximity to your tenants in the building and your commitment to those tenants. I mean, one of the things that I was so compelled by in the original presentation of Campus Partners' big ideas and so on, in addition to the pedestrian nature and diminishing parking as much as possible, and also making places desirable for pedestrians, bicycles, living on the street, is that WSU building, which has the great glass window and the idea that from High Street, your vision will be drawn to that. And, it would make a big difference to me if that corridor of space from High Street back visually was maintained. Is there no possibility of rotating parking along the edge? So it would be on the northern side of what you're showing as lawn, so that you could keep the space that's the visual corridor from High Street back to the WSU window?
When we took a look at that, I saw that as moving parking closer towards High Street. And that would be less ideal.
It would be what?
Less ideal, yeah.
But why? There's parking on High Street.
Well, if we're trying to create a pedestrian oriented edge there, being able to minimize parking on High Street, I think would be our preference.
And the number of spaces that you're showing are the required number that you need? What's the contract with Pella and the fraternity organization?
Yes, those are the number of spaces.
They need exactly that number of spaces.
For our OSU tenants and Helena.
So are you suggesting, KB, that the thing comes off of the alley and then makes a hard right and it turns around wraps around the building?
Right.
Yeah.
So basically, if you were taking the same width of the two cars in the alley down the middle and bent it so that you'd have an L-shaped parking lot instead of something that looks more like a continuous space. Because what they're showing, did you look at the plant material they're proposing at the edge of the parking lot? You're trying to keep it low so it would cover the car, but you'd see over it to the WSU building. Is that your thinking in the design of that edge?
So
What is your
sorry.
thinking in the design of the edge of the parking lot on the west side of the parking lot?
Low hedge and fence, yeah.
So the point there is that you're still going to lose the visual corridor that was part of the original OSU proposal for the glazing at the southernmost corner of the WSU.
And don't forget, we have a giant WOSU sign.
Blade sign?
This, very nice.
Sorry, what about the WSU blade sign?
It's a large sign.
Right, but the argument that I remember from that presentation was that that's going to be a public space where lots of activities are going
Sure,
to take place.
in the final form.
In the final form.
Yeah.
Right, but you can keep that idea if the parking doesn't obscure it. People inside are looking out at something on the parking lot, they see all the way to campus. From campus, you see into that space, which is not going to happen now at eye level.
Staff, I guess I kind of have a question. Maybe the applicant, could you speak to, through that, like, what is the programming, at eye level, for the WOSU building?
Yeah,
Is
it's
there
not,
meeting space or opposite, like?
it's just lobby entrance
Okay.
space, yeah.
Okay.
And it's very minimal, maybe 20 feet of actual glazing on the corner before it
Okay.
turns into sort of a hard.
Where is the audience, the public audience space? That's part of the public.
It's just,
It's-
work on that lobby.
Yeah, it's to the east of the lobby.
To the east of the lobby,
Yeah.
so it's straight
Behind it.
through the lobby.
Straight
right? So
through.
you're in that audience space, you look back out to the parking.
No, you wouldn't. There's closure to that
There's
room.
closure, there's a.
Yeah.
I think you had it last, was there, is there, I can't remember because I wasn't involved, like, is there like a courtyard there that you're referencing, that the building doesn't go to 14th, that there's you had presented something last month that showed what the proposed building is would go on this site when the plan's complete.
I don't remember seeing.
No, he didn't show that last time.
There was a master plan that showed.
There is.
master plan shows-
Did not
No,
present it
okay.
last time.
Yeah.
We approved
Yeah.
it based on that, which has, go ahead, explain that, what the.
Yeah, I mean, there's in conceptual form, the future master plan would have sort of like a wedge green space that would extend from the corner of 14th and High to the WRC entrance. But as I'm looking at this now, our crane tower foundation pretty much blocks a lot of that view.
I still feel very similar to how I did last time. And I had stated that I would be willing to approve it if, with the idea behind utilizing that space a bit more in the front so that it is something that is eye appealing. And I'm still feeling the same way, unfortunately.
And I admit too, I'm really struggling with the temporary nature of the parking lot. I realize it's temporary, but there's nothing that we can do to approve this to keep it as a temporary thing. There's no time limits. It could be that way for the rest of its life without, something else happening in the world that would cause it being temporary. I'm trying to figure out ways to approve it that would work for me. I think the cane in the parking is a little odd. I feel, yes, the lawn is a great idea. It's much better than the gravel, but it still doesn't provide sort of a community space that if it should be permanent, that I would feel comfortable approving. So I'm still not quite there with this proposal. I do appreciate the fact that you included in your material this time, the parking, the bike parking. So that was helpful for me to understand where that would be located. It is in proximity, which I appreciate. But this area right here, it's just, for me, it's a problem to approve.
I guess to me, we're going against an empty parking lot or this, to me, this is better than it's gonna sit what it is. It doesn't expedite the future development. And I mean, so to me, this is an improvement on what's there now. It's not ideal, but that's how I view it as, it doesn't expedite the future development.
Correct.
And I understand what you're saying, right, and that makes a lot of sense. I just don't think it's either or. I think there might be some other possible options in between. And last time, Matt, the suggestions we made and came back and said those aren't possible, but I would hope there would be some more creativity in seeking what else possibly could improve the circumstance. So a question, what Emma brought up is the opportunity of some kind of public occupancy space. So you've got an area, lawn is the thing that you've proposed as the most affordable and most viably temporary thing. But if you can't guarantee, because obviously the hotel is going to come first, if you can't assert that the space with the original plaza space that was designed to the master plan originally approved is going to happen anytime soon, would there be a possibility of exploring turning the area of space on High Street into an area that is more conducive to the things that the Campus Partners plan is about? A public gathering space, something with some facilities that would make it useful, that would be within the realm. I mean, I fully understand you have economic constraints, but is there anything else that you've discussed or could imagine that could be in that space that would make it a desirable public gathering space
Sure.
for the duration?
And I think our focus is on the square itself right now, and getting that activated and programmed.
When you say the square itself, what does that mean?
The University Square Plaza at 15th and I. We are,
Up a block.
that is the focus of the development there, and
Sure.
we intend to focus our programming on that first.
Uh-huh.
And then our other, I guess, concentration is on the west lot. And because of its proximity to the square, it will add more vibrancy to the square.
So will the
in
concrete
concert with
bollards you
that.
just saw remain when it's grass? Those concrete barriers, will they remain when it's grass?
We intend to take those down.
It's an interesting challenge to do something a little more deliberate there but without getting into, I really understand the more investment, the more it seems permanent. But since we don't know what temporary means, to take up that challenge of something affordable, which I think is what you're suggesting, it's a really intriguing kind of thing to look at if.
I guess one thing that I'm kind of mulling over in my head is how likely is it that this would be used for any kind of public purposes? They've got a brand new, beautiful hardscape plaza that's a block up the street. I mean, is there any circumstance that you would really, I mean, I appreciate what everyone's saying, but it's like, I just don't know what you do on a patch of grass that's.
It doesn't, you're thinking of it as a patch of grass though, and you shouldn't be thinking of it as grass. You should be thinking of it as, it could have a mural on it that a local artist could use. If you have like a pop-up wall that, that people put up during the Black Lives Matter movements. It could have, some sort of walking path design that could be like even a meditative circle that they could do, that could be with.
Or you
Some
collaborate.
visual element.
Yeah.
Even without the
Give me something.
presentation element,
Yeah.
but something visual.
The Neighborhood Design Center has done a lot of interesting things that are sort of pocket parks that draw attention to the area in a much different scale and a much different kind of branding or notion than the University Square. What about, since Campus Partners is a very viable and vital part of OSU, finding OSU student groups that would want to do something active and dynamic, planting raised beds, planting. I know all of those things come with maintenance issues, but maybe there's a creative way to get funding from these other areas. I'd love to see fraternities and sororities do something as creative and desirable for the community as that. It just seems like it's such an opportunity. And we're really going lowest common denominator. And I feel, vested in it, that the creativity of the university should also be part of thinking about something good that can be done there. I don't know what more has to happen at University Square. I mean, obviously getting the restaurants open that we've approved in the past and haven't happened, that'll be helpful. But it looks to me like University Square essentially is done. The chain down pieces of furniture, the plantings and so on, or bring more of that here. Something, something that speaks to design, something that speaks to the fact the university cares about the space, instead of just solving a parking problem.
This is staff. Would it be useful to, one, if if parking didn't extend beyond the building, so if maybe the parking was reduced by half, you wouldn't have any parking within the view of the WOSU building, and then the parking was just limited to behind the existing building only.
Yes, but it sounds like that doesn't solve their problem. They
Yeah,
have an
maybe more.
obligation to provide. Um,
But like I said, I would love to move forward with your parking lot if you just gave me like a little bit of, design, opportunities for that space. So
And I mean,
that's where I'm at.
I mean, this would be a level of trust, but I mean, part of what you're talking about is like the idea of pop-up. And right, the idea of pop-up is it happens organically, you
And then
have a
it goes away.
space, that it can be there. And so in some ways, we're asking for something that's permanent, but we want it to be pop-up. And I understand that that's a level of trust with Campus Partner and saying, hey, we're gonna open this space to allow that art structure or do this. But it seems like a conundrum that we're asking for something permanent, but we want pop-up. And that's where I'm struggling, is that I almost see this, if there is that level of trust, you're saying, hey, we have this space for it, that now it's cleaned up, it's not surrounded by Jersey barriers, it's not a gravel lot. There then is a space to allow for those pop-ups. And I don't know if you can put that into something like that, it is a public space, that it's not, zoned off or there, but that's the conundrum that I'm going through.
Well, so I think that the kink in the parking lot is odd. I mean, I think it would work better if you just wrapped it around the building. And if it needs to stop short of High Street some distance, then if you can get the number and then you end up with a strip. Now, the other question I've got though is the crane piece that's got, you're leaving that there so you don't have to redo it when you build the building?
Correct, yeah,
Is it a ton of money to take it all the way apart? I mean, I don't know what,
absolutely.
okay. So,
Yeah, we would leave it there. I mean, we will definitely look at screening that. It's just, plywood and
well, okay, can you zoom in? Focus to, I'm just curious. What is that part of the screen?
that is part of the enclosure. The,
And this is as well?
yeah,
It pops up.
utilities,
Is it like the base of the crane that you're,
correct.
well, there's your art opportunity. So go back to the plan. So you've got.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for that. I don't know how that interacts with this.
Do some
parking.
parking lot enclosure. Call it a day.
We would definitely consider that.
That's what keeps them from finishing the parking lot directly.
Yeah,
But how many spaces would it take out if you straighten the parking lot? How many spaces does that crane base remove?
Probably 3.
But it's taking out 3 right now,
Yeah.
right? 3.
And if I'm not mistaken, that's gonna be an asphalt lot, right? Because Columbus won't let you do gravel lots even for temp, right?
Correct.
We suggesting that you go back to the drawing board? Try more?
I mean, if we can't approve what we see, the creativity of the professional office to find something.
Belkis is conditioning public art pertinent to the UIDRB's approval.
Yeah, so any conditions are tied to getting the COA, so you have to meet the conditions that the board sets before I can stamp any final drawings and issue COA, and the conditions have to be shown on your drawings.
Okay.
So it'd be like an elevation with an arrow saying public art to go here. Kind of thing. And it sounds like if the board is wanting to see some, modifications to this proposal, that it should be continued. And then they can come, next month or the month after they retool the design a little bit. And from what I'm hearing, it sounds like there's a couple ideas that have been thrown out, like wrapping the parking, so it abuts, the existing building, but stopping short of High Street with maybe some screening and landscaping. It sounds like exploring the idea of not taking the parking lot, but bringing it all the way to the crane base, but stopping short of it. And then it also sounds like this layout is okay, but we want to see some sort of pedestrian engagement, like a pocket park or something that can, draw the eye away from the parking and make it more usable by pedestrians with art or seating or a walking path or native plantings. Am I hearing that correctly?
I think that's correct from my point of view. The master plan or the proposal that was the original Campus Partners driver behind all of the work is so rich in content. And I would just refer them back to their own proposal.
Yeah.
So we're not going to change the parking configuration or number of spaces. But I will consider some additional art, public art, to be included on the crane base.
And I can't remember, Matt, if we spoke last time about the area that's currently gravel where your tenants are parking and can't any longer. Is that whole area east of the square completely focused on the next development with the parking lot so that you can't put any temporary parking there? Do you understand what I'm asking, north of?
Yeah, there wouldn't be permits.
The-
We can't park on gravel lot and
No, but I'm saying, could any of that be asphalted? So for instance, if, as Balkus was describing, you cut the lot so that it remained behind the existing Pella building, and you moved some of those spaces into a new temporary lot paved, again, it's your vocabulary of temporary, in that area, has that been explored?
we've thought about it, but the entirety of the site will be developed. So there wouldn't be an opportunity to carve out a piece without
Because
just
it would
impacting
conflict,
it.
by putting that temporary space there, it would conflict with when that project goes forward. And this is coming after the hotel, right? And your argument for not being able to use the east side of the alley is that there's no curb cut?
Correct.
So you would prefer not to wrap that around the south side of the building? No?
No, I think we lost the number of spaces that we're not able to accommodate.
And there is no side street parking on Pearl Alley, right?
No.
It's all delivery as the alley works out, right, from Target down to the shops.
Our deliveries will actually happen off of Campus Place.
And sorry, I apologize, Campus Place is what?
It's the private alley that's in between the Pella FMA building and the University Square South building. And it extends east-west between High Street and.
I gotta get with the new names.
Hey, that's been there for quite a while. So.
New to me.
Yeah.
So you're proposing continuation.
I'm not proposing anything, except just how I'm reading the room.
Yeah. Okay, so do we have to propose continuation as opposed to a vote?
Someone could make a motion to continue the application and then vote on that.
On that.
motion.
All right,
I think we're seeking a vote on this, honestly. But open to conditions for additional artwork.
Then I guess I'll make a motion that we do not approve as is until we are able to understand a proposal for the use of some public space that's adjacent to the park.
Wait, so if we vote on this and it doesn't pass, then don't you have to come back with like a whole new?
That's only if the application is denied.
Okay,
So if someone motions to approve it and then everyone says no, 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 and that's denied and they have to come up with a new design altogether,
okay.
there could be a motion to continue the application and they receive the feedback, you know, and take that in and retool it. Those are two motions that I'm seeing. Another motion is you could motion to approve it on the condition that public arts and pedestrian amenities be reviewed by the board. So they have to specifically meet that and then come back next month and show the board that they're meeting those conditions for approval. Those are a few options.
Confused.
So your motion's on the floor to,
I'm happy to have the motion amended, but
that was
I'm
basically.
trying to follow Malcolm because she understands this process far better than I do. I guess I will, so they don't want a continuance, but if it's voted down, that's the only option.
But typically, don't, isn't there a motion made for approval, even if it's,
It's approved, yes.
yeah, I mean,
You have to.
I've
As
never
long as
heard of
they
a motion to
come back
disapprove.
To disapprove,
Yeah.
right, that's
Or you
right. So
could
you're
motion to
approving it, okay.
continue it and then they
Yeah,
go back, retool it, come back next month.
Oh,
I move to continue.
Second.
Focus, doesn't the applicant have the right to
Yes.
ask for a vote?
Yeah.
That's what, isn't that what he asked?
Oh, you're wanting to either approve or deny the application?
Yeah,
Oh, okay, okay. So then there should be a motion to approve then and we. So I guess the motion needs to be amended, so someone would need to call a motion to approve. And then we would vote on that.
if I say it, do I have to approve it?
No, no.
Okay.
The motion is on the, actually, the motion is on the floor.
I mean, this is a lot of work. I'm not trying to like, shut this completely down. I want to get your parking.
When
I understand,
it's
yep.
adopted, say no.
Got it, I understand.
Gotta be the,
and we're open to conditions for public art. And not just on the crane base, but we can work.
Concrete barricades.
I motion to approve with the conditions that the concrete barriers are removed and the applicant return with examples for a proposal for public art in the grass area.
or seating space.
Right.
Doesn't have to be.
Gathering.
He's got a motion, but would you entertain adding to the suggestion of how that space, that we're open to more than just public art? That in other words, we're open to Campus Partners' creativity in proposing uses for the remaining space beyond the grass.
I
that's shown
definitely
now.
hope.
Programming ideas?
But I would ask Focus on how that
Mhm.
is
Or-
defined, that's hard, that using it as, I'm open to it,
Okay,
100%.
could we
but
say public art and other alternative uses for the space?
That's too vague.
that's
It
too-
has to be
that's-
seen on a site plan
Okay.
or a drawing.
Okay.
So the motion could be, you know, you move to approve the application on the condition that the board review public art that is included in the design as well as pedestrian amenities. And so pedestrian amenities, a walking path, seating, tables.
That's good.
That kind of thing. So that's
Yeah.
a very clear motion. And so the site plan here would be updated to show that programming. And then we'd have an elevation showing the crane base with an arrow pointing to, it says public art here or something like that. So those are the kind of drawings we would
Right.
see in response to that kind of motion.
But we're not specifying the crane base. I mean, it could.
Or, yeah, it could be wherever,
The crane
but I would need to see that on an elevation.
Belkis, when that approval is granted, we still can't get a certificate of occupancy for the parking, right?
No, well, I don't know about a certificate of, no.
Or
because you would need
certificate
your-
of appropriateness for
Yes, you have to satisfy those conditions by coming back to the board next month, showing that you're meeting them, and then you get a, ideally a vote of approval. So you have to come back
Yeah.
next month to show that you're meeting those conditions.
Uh, we will work on public art for the crane base, and we will consider the south elevation of the Pella FMA building, but the pedestrian amenities in the grassy area would not be something we would consider.
So currently then, there's a motion to approve the application with the condition that the concrete barriers be removed and that public art be provided on this site. So that's the motion that's on the table right now. So someone could second that, and then we go down and vote on it. Or a new motion could be made. Those are your choices right now.
I will second.
Okay. So that's been the motion and seconded. Mr. Fleming has recused himself. Ms. Gunselman, Ms. Jones,
Yeah.
Ms. Parker, no. Mr. Reed,
Yes.
Mr. Suplet,
No.
Mr. Szymanski.
Yes.
So that does not pass. So it's been denied. Thank you.
Thank you. Which brings us to new applications.
Yes.
UID 23-02-003, 1355 North High Street.
Yes. All right, so 1355 North Bay Street is on the corner of North Bay Street and King Avenue and will be the new location of the Burke Columbus mixed-use building. The applicant is seeking approval for 2 wall signs, 2 blade signs, and 1 awning sign. The proposed wall signs are 11 feet by 7 inches and 4 feet by 4 inches, located on the north and south elevations and 80 feet and 3 inches above grade. The signs are reverse lit aluminum channel letters mounted on 2-inch deep standouts. Is Keone here? Did someone get Keone? Sorry. He's out in the hall? Yeah.
Just saw more 5.
I'll pause.
No, 'cause I don't know, I can't remember what the rules are for proximity.
It's 500 feet.
It's 500 feet.
I don't know, it's your responsibility to know.
Yeah, well, then I guess it'd be safe.
It's better to be safe than sorry, I would say that.
Myself,
Okay.
since we're at 8th and 9.
Yeah.
You can only leave if you get Keone to come back.
So, I'll kind of back up a little bit. So the applicant is seeking approval for 2 wall signs, 2 blade signs, and 1 awning sign. The proposed wall signs are 11 feet, 7 inches, and 4 feet by 4 inches, located on the north and south elevations and 80 feet and 3 inches above grade. The signs are reverse lit aluminum channel letters mounted on 2-inch deep standoffs. And the proposed blade signs are 6 square feet, 8 inches thick, base lit, and mounted to the facade using mounting bolts. The hardware will be concealed using an escutcheon plate. The canopy sign is 3 feet 1 inches wide and 7 feet tall, using LED face-lit channel letters. They'll be mounted to the steel canopy using bolt connections, and the applicant also shows vinyl window graphics, but a permit is not required for these as the graphic area is 2 square feet and non-illuminated. And I also wanted to say, so the reason, so all graphics are technically able to be staff approved, but the reason why you all are seeing these graphics in front of you today are those two wall signs. So the blade signs are 100% consistent with the plan, and so is the awning sign, and obviously the small window graphics. But those wall signs are very high on the building, and then they're also, larger. And so I decided to just bring everything to you as, kind of one cohesive graphics package for the building, so you get the full context. But it's really the wall signs are why this is before you today. So I'm going to their materials. Here you have, an aerial view of the site. And then here you have the location. So you see the two wall signs on the north and south, the awning sign in green, and then the blue and sort of brown color for the blade signs. This is the wall sign on one of the elevations. You can see at the corner there. And then this is the other side, the south side, showing the wall sign. And then here we have, it's kind of hard to see because they're smaller, but you have the canopy sign right here on the leasing office. And then you have the blade sign right here. It's hard to see.
It's the parking.
Yeah. And then here is the rear elevation, and this has another one of those little parking blade signs right there.
Right. And, Belkis, you said that the leasing sign over the door is also within the guidelines. It's only the two
Yes.
verb signs
It's
that are.
the two verb signs
bigger
that are outside, but I wanted you all to see it as a comprehensive package.
Right.
And so here are the details for the two wall signs. So you can see the lighting, the sizing and the scale. And then this is how the electricity runs to those signs and then how they're mounted as well. And here's more on the lighting for that wall sign. This is the leasing sign, so you can see the details of, where it is and the scale. And then also the electricity and how it's mounted. And then same thing with the blade sign. So again, the materials, how it's lit, the arm and the scale of it. And then again, how it's mounted to the facade and how it's lit. So after staff review, the proposal is generally consistent with the recommendations of the University District Plan. The plan recommends that new signage be designed as a logical and complementary component of the overall design of the storefront in terms of lighting, scale, color, style, and materials. The plan notes that each building or ground floor tenant space be provided one wall sign and one projecting sign for per street frontage. That pedestrian-oriented signs are preferred and that internally illuminated graphics can be considered. Wall signs are to be sized to fit within the building's facade design and located within a sign band when one exists, and that they be limited in size to a maximum width of 2/3 of the width of the building front. Projecting signs are to be proportional to the building, 6 square feet per side, and located between the storefront display windows and below the second-story window sills. Lastly, canopy signs are to be limited to the front valance and not exceed 50% of the area of the front-facing valance with lettering 6 to 8 inches high. The projecting and canopy signs are consistent with plan guidelines. Although the wall sign is located higher than the ground floor transom and second floor windowsill, the scale and lighting are appropriate within the overall building facades, and as such, staff recommends approval. Thank you.
Thank you. There will likely be questions, so if you'd be so kind as to raise your right hand. Yeah, I mean, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Would you like to add the city's commentary on the?
Well, a little bit. My name's Del Lambert, Development Manager with Subtext. This is Haley Hardman with Hardman Signs. We appreciate the opportunity to meet with you guys this evening and present our exterior signage and graphics plan. Thank you, Belkis, for your report and your assistance throughout this process. I'm going to scrap most of this because she did a really good job at recapping our application. So I will note for all signs that we are installing power inside of the building, hiding all wiring, covering all mounting bolts with escutcheon plates, and all the illuminated signs will be at 4000 K LEDs, which is the same color temperature as all the other exterior lighting. The proposed wall signs are larger at 50 square foot each and above the second story, but we believe they're consistent with the scale of the building. and balance the need for identification with the project design intent that many of you are well aware of, was to preserve the existing contributing fabric and character-giving elements along the pedestrian scale at King Avenue and High Street. So, I mean, we looked at this a lot, and they're just, with how the facades are recreated, rebuilt in kind, we didn't really want to detract from those with these types of wall signs. These would be mounted to the building into blocking consisting of 2 layers of 3/4 inch plywood attached to interior studs by galvanized hangers. There are 2 other projects with somewhat similar wall signs at this elevation and scale, include the Lux Bella 1529 North High Street and the View on Pavey Square at 10 West Northwood Avenue. And then regarding the other signs, the awning sign is really just for wayfinding for the primary residential entrance, given that that area is set back from the rest of the facade and bounded to the north and south by retail space. And then the blade signs are just for parking wayfinding. Just want to make sure it's easy for residents, guests, deliveries, retail guests, can easily locate the parking. And then the window graphics are just office hours for the front door. So we appreciate your time, and we're here for any questions.
Thank you.
I have a question, the amount of light that comes out of this sign, do you know if it will affect the people who are in that window right underneath the sign? Did you see how there's like 2 windows
Yeah,
on the other side too? Do you know how like bright it will?
it will not affect those units, and I can let Haley speak to that.
No, it only should go out about 5 to 6 inches,
Okay,
and it won't have any impact on anything else around.
all right.
Yeah, so they're halo lit, so it should be projecting back towards the building. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
I'm fine with it. I think, yeah, it's right. There's precedent that looks Bell, Pavey Square. And for the record, I think we're tacky and ugly, but,
That's
I don't think we should be branding buildings like this in the city, but there is precedent, so my personal feelings aside, I have no objection.
Probably hope you don't have to ever service those.
Surely not.
I agree with Jim.
I motion to approve?
Second.
Can I ask a question? There is a memorandum of agreement arriving between the neighborhood association and subtext. My signature is on that because I was president of the association at the time. Is that any sort of problem with my vote, Elkis? I mean, it doesn't seem to be, but as long as we're being very careful.
It's typically if you have a direct conflict of interest, if you have a financial stake in the proposal, or if you have, personal connections, family connections, to the proposal. You have a development that's close by, that's where you want to recuse yourself from voting.
Even without getting into the questionable enforceability of MOUs, I think there's enough distance. Okay, I just wanted to check with you.
And and you disclosed it, it's on the record as well. But it's strictly up to you. I can't say what to do. Well, it's been motion and second. Is there any other discussion on the motion? Okay. Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Ms. Gunzelman,
Yes.
Ms. Jones.
Yes.
Ms. Parker.
Yes.
Mr. Reed.
Yes.
Mr. Suplet.
Yes.
And Mr. Samansky has recused himself. All right, that passes.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
I'll be in touch.
Thank you, Belkis.
Brings us to UID 22-11-007A, 2195 North High Street. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead and pass.
These are copies of slides.
Well, thank you for grabbing.
Thank you for some of us who are challenged, darling. I should, but I don't.
Thank you for
Oh.
All right, 2195 North High Street is a site that is 0.29 acres, zone C4, and currently home to Little Bar built in 1966. The applicant is seeking board recommendation on a proposal to rezone the site from C4 to CPD. The applicant is also seeking the board's feedback on a conceptual proposal to raise the existing structure to construct a 7-story mixed-use building. The proposed CPD text outlines an FAR 3.76, 22 residential units, 80 beds, 10,588 square feet of commercial space, and a height of 68 feet. No on-site parking will be provided, but a third-floor connector will provide access to a proposed parking garage at the 50 West Lane Avenue site. This parking garage is proposed to contain 54 spaces for the church and 40 spaces for the residential units, which is consistent with the parking required by code. The 50 West Lane Avenue site is outside of the University Impact District. Proposed building materials include stone, brick, strong face block masonry, metal panels, fibercement board panels with metal wheels, and curtain wall system. The applicant last came before the board in January 2023, where the board stated that they did not have enough information to comprehensively assess the updated CPD text, as the drawings did not reflect it. The board expressed to see the full project updated in the next month to understand the project scope holistically and to understand how the parking on the adjacent site relates to this site. In response to the design, the board recommended larger windows relative to the wall space for an inherent first-floor storefront and questioned the symmetrical hierarchical facing Face Street. The board appreciated the step back along Norwich and wanted to see additional details in the programming of the second-story deck space. In response to board feedback, the applicant updated the design to reflect the CPD text. The applicant lowered the height from 78 feet at 6 stories to 68 feet at 5 stories, reducing the FAR from 4.5 to 3.76, added window openings on the north elevation, enlarged the corner entrance opening and glazing, and enlarged the church entry and glazing. Submitted materials include the CPD text, site map, site photos, site plan, and conceptual elevations and renderings. So if we go to those, here again, you have the CPD text starting off, and then that goes into the overall development plan for both sites. And again, we're just focusing on site 2 for the Little Bar site. Here are existing site photos. We've seen these before. And here is the site plan showing, updated numbers related to the CPD text. And then we have elevation. So on the High Street side, you can see how, the glazing was enlarged at the corner. And then also on the Norwich Avenue piece, you can see the enlarged church opening as well. And we have the elevations for the alley sides and the south and the west. And then a rendering of the site as well. So after review, the proposal is generally consistent with the recommendations of the University District Plan. The plan recommends site for mixed use, which calls for a minimum FAR of 1, max height of 72 feet, and parking at a ratio of 0.375 spaces per bed. The plan states that new construction utilize high-quality materials, building articulation, a high level of transparency on the first floor, street trees, art, and lighting that minimizes light spill. The plan also calls for a building's height and mass to be mitigated through the use of setbacks, quality architecture and materials, and the inclusion of a civic component that benefits the community. Planning generally supports the rezoning as the design includes step-backs, high-quality materials, high level of ground floor transparency, street trees, art murals, and the inclusion of a civic component that benefits the community, all which are consistent with plan design guidelines. Planning supports the proposed parking as the site will share parking with an adjacent proposed parking garage and is within a neighborhood that is walkable and with access to transit. As such, staff supports the recommendation of the rezoning from C4 to CPD. For the conceptual design, staff recommends public art or windows on the wraparound west-facing wall of the church along East Norwich, which can be accommodated per the applicant. As the proposal develops, staff anticipates details on the upper story landscaping and exterior lighting details that address pedestrian activity while also minimizing light spill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeffrey L. Brown, attorney for the applicant.
And Mitchell Aycock, Associate Architects.
I need to swear you both in. Thank you. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
Please proceed.
So I just want to provide some additional material that was not provided in the applicant, just to make sure we're all clear. This is kind of a couple slides we presented in front of the University Area Commission, and I know it goes back to some of the questions we had before. So for the total project, again, the High Street building is what we're talking about. We're just rezoning from C4 to CPD, and basically it adopts everything in the university guidelines. This is a summary, not a legal thing, but the one variance from those guidelines is no parking. We have 0 parking. However, we are providing that parking on an adjacent parcel to the limits, to the requirements of the zoning code, and actually exceeds the district guidelines. On Lane Avenue, we are rezoning from AR4 and RF2 to AR3. This is a technicality. We're reducing the rear yard from 25% of the lot to 0, but there is no really rear yard. The Baptist Church has already combined the Lane Avenue parcel, the Norwich parcel, and the alley in between was vacated to them as well. So we don't want a backyard on Norwich. We don't want a backyard on Lane. So that's more of a technicality. They're going to allow parking for non-residential uses and allow commercial uses on this parcel. The non-residential uses are these uses from High Street. The commercial uses are, we have about 2,500 square feet. At the request of the University Area Commission, which I think is a great idea, we included commercial space on the first floor of Lane Avenue, and those spaces will be accommodated. And that's a variance on a residential use.
Sorry, where do we see that, Mitch? Is that?
It's on the first page. All the variances for the Lane Avenue building.
Sorry, I was reading the plan, the first floor plan that shows the different church functions.
Okay, so this is just the High Street building. I'm going through the Lane Avenue building.
Sorry, Lane
Yep.
Avenue. Okay, so
So this-
so the commercial frontage is on Lane.
Yes.
Got it.
And then the other is increasing the height from 72 to 100 feet
Lane Avenue building.
on the Lane Avenue building.
Outside.
That's that variance. That's in the, correct.
So what's in front of you that we're asking for your approval is the rezoning for the High Street building. And as staff has indicated, the overlay has this as regional mixed use, which is what we're proposing. We have the Baptist Church relocating to this building on the first floor, and then above them are all the Baldy family. And the only development standards we are modifying is a technical one that the city code requires you to park on the parcel where the use is. And so what we're doing is we have 0 parking on this site, but we are meeting the Columbus Code, which is in excess of the overlay requirement or the area plan requirements on the parcel next door. And so the way this would work is we would come in and get approval of the building from you. We would then go to the city and we would show them that we have the approval of the building. And then we would also have to show them that we have the required parking that is called for in the zoning on this parcel next door. So they're tied in together. You can't do one without the other.
And then
Just so I'm clear, so that it's not a request for 0 parking, it's that parking be included on it.
Right,
Yeah.
it is.
0 parking.
Because it's a technical issue in that the city says the parking for the use has to be on the same tax parcel. We can't do that. The Lane Avenue building is a residential building, and so we needed the council variance, one, to have the retail restaurant that we had talked about, that planning and UAC asked us to do, and also to park the commercial requirement and the multifamily requirement in the parking garage that is the Lane Avenue building.
And so that's the tie of how you put it. It's not saying 0 parking, just so it's not.
No,
saying
it's
zero,
just
saying it's.
Saying next door.
Yeah.
Yeah.
0 parking on site.
On site.
The table on the handout
Yeah.
that Mitch provides, they're basically providing 340 spaces on the adjacent site. So where are those?
Where are the 348 spaces? There's 4 decks of parking.
Can you show me on the drawing?
Uh, It's on the second sheet. So, I mean, that's a site plan. I don't have the plans for the Lane Avenue building. But if you drew 50 feet back from Lane Avenue,
I mean, yeah, I guess my point is, in general, it's reasonable, right? I mean, here's my perspective, two things. One is, Tim, where's this with regard to the UAC?
The commission did, vote to decline the application.
Okay. Because,
Okay, I'm no longer chair, so that committee, and I can't quote you what was sent in on the recommendation form. But from my own notes, I would say that there was concern about, first of all, a good deal of, resident opposition, which we felt that the project management had not dealt with. Traffic on Norwich, in terms of access to the building and possibly, well, I would say, certainly a very major factor is the height variance on Lane Avenue.
okay. I mean, here's my perspective, like, I don't really care what the UAC thinks, but like, you're asking me to vote in support of no on-site parking on site, which is reasonable. You're gonna provide it somewhere else. And so I'd like to see where that else is. If the UAC had voted in favor, I'd be like, oh, okay, they saw it. And it must have been reasonable to them. But the thing I'm struggling with is essentially taking it on faith that you're providing the parking on another site. I'd like to see a drawing showing where the parking.
I didn't know.
It's not a big deal, but I
We did
feel
get-
like.
Well,
it's-
we had planning approval from I mean, we've submitted it to the plan and we've been recommended for approval by the planning department. And they've seen
Why
plans.
can you not show me
I mean, we specifically said we weren't going to because it's not on the parcel. I don't know.
It's tricky because since that piece is
I'm just
not
doing
in
what
the
I-
impact district, I don't know that the board can review drawings outside of.
not even a comment on the drawing, but
Not comment.
I don't feel
I can bring it
unreasonable to, just for someone to say,
To her.
hey, here's the plan of the parking garage, here are the 348 spaces for the building. At which point I'd be like, okay, great, that's terrific, I'm done, I'm good.
Okay.
But it may be one clarification, because the way is it site specific, or is it just saying, though, that it could be, I mean, it could be.
No, the zoning text says it's on the parcel to the west.
Just, okay.
So it's
But
tied
then we
specifically
got- yeah.
to where it is. Also, we kind of ended up with a split vote. We got approval from the zoning committee, but didn't get approval from the full commission.
So I think to allay your, well, I don't know if this will allay your concerns or not.
You should have in your, because we've sent you the updated drawings for the whole
Right.
project.
So on Lane Avenue, the entire extent of Lane Avenue, 50 feet deep, is either residential above the first floor or first floor commercial uses, student amenities, commercial space. On Norwich, and on that plan you can see it, it's fronted by two-story townhomes, and then the entrance to the garage where you see the plaza on the north side. The garage will run down the alley. It'll be an open-air garage, and you'll see the open-air garage along the east and west. And on the west, what we've decided, which we think is a civic engagement, is there isn't a really good movement north and south pedestrian. A lot of the kids either don't want to go all the way to High Street, they go down these alleys, the alleys aren't that great. So what we're going to do is, along with the Catholic Church, is create this pedestrian corridor on the west, which is shown there. And so you will be walking in open air garage. We're committed to light it, landscape it, and put murals up, engage with public art on it. On the east, on the alley side, again, we're gonna do, the public engagement with the art and everything, but we are on the alley and the alley is 20 feet. And 18 feet across there is a line of dumpsters. So,
To email it and pull it up. I don't want to be going through my email.
sure.
Yeah.
You know, I got to call my office in a special little container.
I don't know if that allays your concerns or, I bet,
Just find.
it's not like I didn't ask.
Email the sheet to me. I'm happy to pull.
It's like, when you submit your taxes and the feds.
When the
you
feds
put-
tell you not to, then
You put down your income on your taxes. And the feds don't trust you to tell the truth, so they make you put on a W-2. Like, and it substantiates the thing you said you did.
so you don't trust me, I guess.
Yeah.
For the record, you don't trust me. That's fine.
You're giving me words. I
Okay.
mean, I can go in front of the
Fine.
board and do the same thing. Like,
I was told not to bring them, okay? I will
that's-
bring them, but I don't.
Mitch, I'm not trying to give you a.
Let's just find it.
I'm just trying to
Move
do
on.
due diligence here. I feel like, if the rest of the board disagrees, then, but I don't think it is unreasonable to ask, like, okay, you're gonna provide 348 spots. You're like, let's see those spots.
Haven't done with.
Yeah. No one's gonna comment, and I hear Belkis. It is outside our purview. I do not plan on making any comments on the garage, certainly none that are action.
Do we have any other points that we'd like to make
Well,
while we're waiting for the email?
Probably something.
Anybody have any other?
That email.
In principle, I think it's totally reasonable. I think if the development provides parking and they are, as Mitch has on his table, they are exceeding the university district guidelines. And the parking's on an adjacent property and, that is reasonable. I guess I'm curious what the total count is like, because I think there can be a little bit of semantics, like how many spaces in the garage?
348, it's on,
It's in
oh, right there.
So the total number of spaces in the garage is 340.
Correct.
And if I
So
understand,
what that means is the adjacent site you're not providing any parking?
Well, it's all there on the third page, Kelly.
and if I understand correctly, right, I think healthy is the city code is 0.5. The regional mixed use, the design guidelines are 0.375, so they are actually at 0.5 over. Which we said before that, so it would go.
We exceed the guidelines
We
and
exceed
meet
the
the zoning code requirement.
Right.
Yeah,
And
sorry,
the
you're
cost of
over,
that-
you could go to
the cost of that is
0.375. You
higher.
could have,
I
we
see
went-
the bottom of the thing.
you
yeah.
could have 277 and meet the university guidelines.
Correct.
It's 348 total spaces, 94 of which are dedicated to 2195 North High. And the 94 spaces provided for 2195 North High are compliant.
Or actually over compliant, because they're doing the residential at 0.5 and they
Yeah.
could do
They
it
could
at
do it
0.365.
Well,
133.
I'm not sure if that's true. So if we go below 0.5, even if we were above
You need a
3.7,
variance.
we still need a
You need
variance.
a variance. but
Yes.
The, the guidelines that were.
Correct.
Is at 0.375.
The point is 2195 North High, between the various uses, requires a total of 94 spaces.
Correct.
And they are providing the 94 spaces on the adjacent parcel. Out of the 384, 348 stall garage, which means, the garage is pretty big. It's providing plenty of parking. for
Absolutely.
space development.
Absolutely.
That's,
I mean, in my sense, and we're not speaking about that building, is that you're providing too much parking in an area where we're trying to diminish parking, but.
But now
that's
and we went
different.
through that with the University Area Commission.
So I
So,
trust you. and I
We
don't
didn't,
have
we didn't
that-
win that
but
argument,
it was a
so we're
good
meeting
point.
code.
But we brought, the reason why we went up 10 feet is so we did not have a parking variance. And that was the most important thing for the Area Commission. So
Yeah.
we actually had a scheme where we were lower, but we complied with the university guidelines. But there, as Tim,
look, that is not my business, so.
Right.
But there's plenty of tall buildings on lanes, so, that is not unreasonable from my perspective. And I don't have a problem with the garage on the site. I would just like,
Sure, I understand.
Yeah, so that's, I think that's clear now, and I think that it's clear. Anytime you can show information that helps see the
Yeah.
big picture, because you are doing creative work of making both sites solve the problem. I think that's good. I think that's appropriate. And I think it would be very helpful to talk about this building that is in our purview. Because last time we met, we talked about the desire for commercial street front on High Street. And you are not showing any commercial space on High Street, and that's the part that I would like to hear.
Okay,
Well, we have the church. So the church is a permitted use. And part of this deal was to relocate them from their current place into new space because they felt very strongly they still wanted to be part of the university community and be able to be available for the students.
we have.
I mean, from my standpoint, I'm okay with it. Like, I think if I look at the first floor plan, what's up against High Street are
Yeah.
kind of meeting
It's
rooms and
8 a.m.
gathering spaces and informal spaces. So I think in terms, like my perspective is those are probably spaces that are more used on a daily basis
Yeah.
than the fellowship hall or the sanctuary. And it does not strike me as unreasonable with the church because of first floor commercial use. So that I don't actually have an issue, but I think I'm not 100% convinced that the facade at the upper level serves you that well. If I look at, and not commenting on the apartment layout, but if you look at kind of the way the windows interact with the units, some of your living rooms have pretty tiny windows. It seems like you could rethink the composition of the facade in such a way to get more generous windows that better serve the interior units. I think the comment that it made earlier, I don't think you need the sort of axial hierarchical thing. I think you can redesign the scheme in a way that would be more interesting and would get you more gracious units.
I'd like to go back to the original subject. We have different positions on that. I think it would be far more desirable for the city if there could be some commercial space there. It's just an opinion, and it's based on the guidelines for the way we look at urban space. If it can't happen and the client requires these spaces there, I can live with it. I'm just, well, for the record, anytime we can have desirable commercial space, it makes a better sidewalk, it makes better street light.
You mean retail space? I mean, that is their public engagement. They have a public engagement mission as well, and they want to bring students in, and they have luncheon, and they have.
And as I said, I'm not gonna make an issue of it. I'm
Okay.
just expressing an opinion
I just-
that's related to the
What-
guidelines of what our work is. The other thing I'm curious about is how does any daylight get to the sanctuary, and what's the second floor plan look like? So there's no section through the sanctuary. There's no second floor plan here, right? We go from first to third,
So,
first to third.
well, when you say you go first to third, so.
It's labeled.
So
Yeah,
there is, yeah,
so the second, okay, we can go back to the elevation. We only did the third floor.
uh-huh,
We didn't do the second floor because because we had to add a deck to the parking garage.
uh-huh.
We are connecting at the third floor. There's a second floor of apartments that look exactly like this on the second floor.
Really? So the ceiling height over the sanctuary, the fellowship hall, the offices, the restrooms is all the same height? And what is that height in section?
23 feet, floor to floor.
So
Now,
it.
we haven't started designing it. We don't know what that will allow them to be, whether it be 18 feet
Okay.
or maybe even less, because we have to move them.
Mechanical
And again, we
system.
are a conceptual design.
Got it.
We haven't engaged engineers, so we're not exactly sure.
Understand.
Okay.
I understand. When we see it again, it'll be super helpful to see sections to
Yeah,
understand.
again, and
that
this is just for
sanctuary
context.
space. And
There it is.
being positioned where it is within the building doesn't look like you can get daylight into the sanctuary.
So, and they understood that. And the one opportunity, they're not going to get it from the sky. And we discussed that with them.
Okay.
Yep. If we could go, can we
To the
not look at that?
elevations,
Yeah,
probably.
that's a, Yeah.
Back.
And I'm not even sure if that one. Because I found a dated one, so you'll see that attaching to the second floor. That was
there.
for. Gosh, I said the wrong one.
Wow.
Well, that like, at least gives.
It's the same thing. There's one more deck. So the upper left is the west that butts with the Newman Center. And kind of, we're gonna landscape, light, art murals, but open garage. And then on the alley side, there'll be some mechanical space over on the south side, and then on the east, on the north half of that garage, it'll be open area garage.
Or,
No, we are conceptual, but I've laid it out, and our parking guy, and there's 93 spaces on the second and third floor. I think 80 on the fourth, and
sympathetic. The city told you not to bring anything if you're trying. So just describe it for me, Mitch. The garage fronts the alley. It's.
so if we go to the plan, the entrance is on Norwich. Sorry, our site plan, page number 2 that you have.
Yeah.
Up on that that plaza.
It's on the entrance from the pink section west.
Yeah, the northwest
It is
corner.
both entrance and exit. I should have mentioned that the owner has, so the church has 54 spaces. They only need about 9 of those spaces as permanent staff, right? And that's, so what the agreement came was, we'll provide 40 spaces during non-church event uses for public. So there'll be a gate at that front, which if you're public, you'll get it, and you'll go to the left and you'll park. You'll have access to you'll have 2 ways out to the north, one to the south, one to the north. If you're a student, you keep on going and you'll go through another gate, and then you're in student land. That's kind of what they request. So there'll be 40 spaces on the, let's call it the northeast, which will be public spaces, visitor spaces, for the residents and stuff, non-resident spaces. And then obviously for church services, holiday services, it'll be the churches.
And then the garage is, again, just trying to understand. You got townhouses to the north laminating the garage. The garage is exposed on the alley side. And I assume it's buried south, west, and north.
It is not buried west.
Okay.
It's
open west and east, and then it's buried south and north.
Yes.
Okay.
The townhomes are on this north, and the retail and student amenity and lobby is.
And it's 3 stories.
4 stories.
4 stories.
Yes. And it's right at grade. So.
Okay. I mean, just wanted to see it.
I
due diligence.
If you would have had,
It's-
what problem?
It's
I'm trying to hide
it's not your fault.
Yeah, I'm
You
not trying to hide.
you were expressly instructed not to. So certainly do not complain. I'm fine with it.
So I guess I have a question about the approval process for the Lane Avenue building, because the parking is somewhat contingent on that. Although, that project moving forward, correct?
Well, there's one zoning application that includes the High Street building and the Lane Avenue building.
So it's combined.
So it is combined.
Well, I think all we're doing is we are voting in support that the parking spaces are not provided on the site.
Correct.
We're not voting to say you don't need parking spaces. We're voting to say you can put them somewhere else. So, if they want to buy property, a mile down the road.
They just said it's specific.
No, it's-
That's what I asked.
It's in the
specific.
zoning text that the parking is tied to.
Yeah,
the-
well, I mean, I guess
Yeah,
that's part.
So-
Because they are basically saying based on text that they will provide parking.
Yes.
Some.
But I'm answering Louis, but I think it's more beneficial to us. What we're approving is this plan doesn't move forward without the other one moving forward, because those spots have to be on that site.
Exactly.
And so they would have to come back to us again if they wanted to move them somewhere else and move
Sure.
forward.
Or if the deal went south, and somebody came in and wanted to put up, I don't know, whatever, their parking would have to be on the Baptist church, so, and that's not gonna happen.
It's just, yeah, so, I mean, just to clarify the process, the vote, you guys are only here today on the vote on variance. And so
Well,
what we are voting on is
I'm sorry,
It's a zoning.
it's a PUD.
on the CPD.
Right.
CPD.
I'm just-
We are voting in support of the CPD, and the only way it impacts the site is we are supporting that the parking necessary for 219545 is provided on the adjacent site as part of that development.
Correct, yes, sir.
I'm good with it.
I think they're here for the conceptual architectural review too.
But we should.
But that's a separate, but
That's
that's.
We should vote
Yes.
on the CPD and then move
Yes.
to that.
Yes.
A motion, please.
I move to support the CPD as,
Second.
Mr. Fleming?
yes.
Is there any room for public input?
Oh, we forgot to ask. Oh,
Oh, yes.
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 There is.
Should we?
I need to swear you in.
I don't know.
Glad to swear if you tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Thank you.
To the best of my ability. I'd like to, if I might, add some context to this project. It was mentioned at the University Area Commission meeting that, what is it, American Campus Communities was purchased by the Blackstone Group this past August. Blackstone is well known for its tactic of buying up single-family homes across the country by the thousands, by the tens of thousands, turning them into rentals, and then raising the rents, causing all kinds of problems in the the local housing market. As an example, unions representing 110,000 workers in the University of California system have written a letter to the university asking that it take back its $6 billion investment in the Blackstone Group out of fear that Blackstone might cause housing difficulties for their members. Closer to home, in January, check, I'll make sure I got this right. There's an article in Business Insider, 19 January of this year. Blackstone's head of real estate for the Americas, a gentleman named Nadim Meghi, in an internal call, according to Business Insider, that was intended to reassure investors that Blackstone was a good investment. Here's what he said, quote, "We're a big owner of student housing, and in our student housing portfolio, we are signing leases today for the next academic year at 9% higher rents than this year. So we know what this growth will look like," Meghi said. Blackstone, well, you heard the story of the camel got its nose in the tent. Blackstone is the camel, and University Area Housing is the tent. Any questions?
What is this gamble? What? Never heard of this.
My analogy. Maybe it's a bad one.
Oh.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
And I should speak to that.
This is a zoning question. It applies to what's an appropriate land use for the property, and whatever agreements we make go with the property, not necessarily with an applicant. So based on what the staff has told us in terms of what the area plan talks about and how this property should be used, what we're asking for in this zoning is in compliance with the plan. And we think it's an appropriate land use no matter who the applicant is. And that's the question for the commission.
There's a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any discussion before I call the roll for a vote?
Can I have a moment to just make my position clear? as you know, I'm part of the University Area Commission dealing with both components of the project. Someone brought up the word tricky before. It's a tricky situation I find myself in. If I vote yes, then I seem to be contradicting the action of the University Area Commission. And while I don't feel that I represent them in that kind of strict way, I don't want to contradict my own involvement in that discussion. If I vote no, then I am I'm bringing issues into this that relate to the part of the project that is outside of the review board, which I also don't want to do. So I plan to abstain, and I have discussed that with the president of the University Area Commission, who concurs that is the fair thing for me to do.
Any other discussion? Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Ms. Gunzelman,
Yes.
Ms. Jones.
Yes.
Ms. Parker. Yes. Mr. Reed.
Yes.
Mr. Supla,
Abstain.
Mr. Samansky.
Yes.
The rezoning passes.
Thank you very much.
I guess now, any commentary on the conceptual design?
I guess I'd add to what you only say in terms of, it is really hard looking at these and seeing windows, tucking corners, windows, that wall, and how that relates to those unit plans and what's best for the units. So, from a conceptual, the single windows don't really seem to jive with the plans nor what I think would be expected in this location. So I think there's a longer way to go on the residential architecture than just colors and all of that. I think it's hard to comment on all of that without seeing more of how that architecture actually relates to the plans that are there.
And as we develop the plans.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's gonna greatly affect, because like, I'm just looking at your third floor plan, you have windows and showers and so those things, there are gonna be significant movements, and so, it's hard to get more constructive feedback.
And I should preface this, these are very preliminary, have not been blessed by the client, throwing in stuff and trying to use their stuff. But I wanted to respond to January's, and so, again, that's why we're not asking for this.
I mean, I think my advice is, since we mentioned, you can probably loosen up the high street facade. I think you can, if you move away kind of from the normal symmetry, I think you can get something that'll get you nicer units that frankly will be more appealing and might get you a more interesting facade as well.
Thank you.
I would like to see some more interesting plant life on the exterior, something that draws your eye a little bit more to the elevation of it, because it is going to be so big. So I understand that you have a mural on the alley, correct? But I would like to see it more present on other parts of the building as well.
I'm sorry, the murals? Or-
Yeah, you have a mural or something, or an
Yeah.
art piece? Yeah, an art in the alley. And,
So is there a place for public art on the High Street front, is that what you're?
yeah,
On the High Street side?
yes, or not only public art, but could there also be different types of foliage that's used besides
So,
the trees that are, and I
so
know.
those street trees are gonna be dictated by the city forester. I mean, right now, those are just
Placeholder.
placeholders, so.
But I think Emma's point is really good. Can you find a way to add more green anywhere? You've got the balconies that are showing, sort of bubblegum trees up there. It's hard to tell, but do you assume that those third floor terraces are not accessible?
Correct, they are not accessible.
Yeah,
That is
so-
not a deep, that
Right.
is a 10-foot deep.
Yeah,
Right.
I understand.
Right.
Because last time you had said that those
Right.
apartments were there, and Lauren kind of helped
Yeah.
explain that as well. But I think thinking of OSU as a whole and thinking about where this exactly is going, this is a really big spot that's going to have a lot of traffic. And
Sure.
conceptually, I think the design is a little outdated.
Well, right now, the High Street, the west side of High Street sidewalk is a great big mess, as you know, with signs and things in the sidewalk. You can barely, two people can barely pass. And, you know, you're not gonna be able to improve much on that. You're gonna do what you can do there, but it's a very, very tight sidewalk. So I don't know, I'm sympathetic with Emma's request, but I think what's gonna have the greatest impact on the sidewalk is what's happening behind the storefront glazing.
Sure.
So, and, you know, you have little control over how the client is gonna use that. I don't know. If you-
Because that's not our property.
Right.
Where the trees are now is not our property. I mean,
Right.
that's the public right of way and the city's gonna
Right.
have a big,
Yeah, I'm talking about on the building itself, though.
Mhm.
so we're right up on the right of way. And really the only place for vegetation would be that second floor.
If you think horizontally, but there's
Or third floor.
vertically.
All the way on the top of the roof?
Well,
No,
what
I
is,
mean, on the side of, on the.
On the side, but you gotta find, you still need soil somewhere, right? I
Right.
mean, so, and again, you get me the city to promise they don't dump salt on those sidewalks. See, I mean, it becomes,
no daylight there at all.
Yeah, I'm just suggesting that, that there is a sustainable way to, like have plant life that wraps the building in a sense. To add, design and, it's better for the environment.
This is stuff, are you suggesting like a green wall?
Yeah,
Okay, like some sort of green wall system?
yes,
Okay.
yeah, I am suggesting green, thank you.
I'm gonna advise against it. Green walls are great in a place where the growing season is year round. Where it's not, you're gonna get dead and stuff. Where it's like-
And it's a north facing facade.
Yeah.
it just, in the way the city treats the streets and the snow and
Well, it would be higher, wouldn't it
it's,
be?
but the roots, I mean, we gotta hit the ground somewhere.
No, I think what she's getting, and I'm still probably, again, just because I know, when I said I need
Oh.
Franklinton, the Kaufman project that did that, and
Yeah.
they really
Yeah, it's been a
struggled.
disaster.
It's been a disaster in this climate. They did it where it's these removable planters, they hang on that, and
Got you.
it. in
It's
this
basically
climate,
annual.
it's not- Yeah, and
Because it dies every year.
But it's bad, right?
No,
Yeah.
So that can have to
It's
replace-
tough,
yes.
especially, well, if you don't bury it in the ground, then you gotta take it down for the, I mean, you'll kill anything that you put in hung logs. I mean,
I mean,
You
the
freeze-
only, the only opportunity that I think you've got, which is gonna be up to the tenant, is, given where this is like really, really large decorative pots. I mean, something big enough you can't walk off with it, and it's an annual thing that's out there from May 1st until
yeah,
October 1st.
Talking about sidewalk,
Yeah,
that's tough on that side. I mean,
Yeah, it's gonna
that's a tight,
students will tip them over.
Yeah,
no
that's
matter
a
how
tight-
big they are.
and we've got that sign, I mean, that's arch. So there's a lot right there on that south.
I will challenge you, though, I think on that terrace, 10 feet, while it's not there, there is a chance to do something there.
Yeah.
In terms of, I say green roof, I know there's just more there, but rather than just a few trees or a few bushes, I think there is a way to make that a unique feature, those people that are gonna be looking out their windows. So I would challenge on coming back with some ideas for that area that are unique.
And I mean, that's pretty reasonable. That's also something that I think are committed to do as part of their design. I know, Yater Square down in, Schumacher Place has done something similar. So
Yep.
that's achievable from the standpoint of a developer.
And seeing this plan like this is helpful to see that setback. I think this is the first time I'm seeing how that relates to streets with this kind of plan. I mean, it is, to me, that adds some, a discussion that we had before about
Sure.
the relief from Norwich.
Yep.
Seeing this in this form, I think, yeah, that relief is significant enough and provides that, so.
I kind of said, the idea of the bridge over the alley is for connection between parking.
No, it's just pedestrian connection.
No, but it's the connection from the parking garage.
For the
In other
residents.
words, For the people living in the building that we're
Yes.
talking about here in this
Yes.
context,
Yes.
that bridge is connecting from the parking garage, not from other residential corridors.
It is, no, it is correcting, from the residential quarters on the, I'm gonna call it fifth floor, which is their atrium, I mean, their amenity deck. If you look at, site plan, there's a big U on that second page.
So that plaza is on the 5th floor?
That plaza is on the 5th floor. And that 5th floor is the 3rd floor of High Street. And it's we've got 15 feet of grade difference between our southwest corner and our northeast corner. So,
Right, it slopes.
and we have very, it's gonna get confusing. We have 4 decks of parking,
Yeah,
but in that first 50-foot bar, we have 3 levels of space. A high 2-story space in the first floor, or not 2-story, but a high space on the, and then 2 levels. Those 3 are hiding the 4
Yeah.
deck
Parking
parking
decks.
garage. And we're arriving on top of the parking garage, and that's how we'll.
and I was misreading, I think you clarified that the purpose of that conduit is for people who live in the High Street block to go to the amenity court.
Yes.
That's a
And to move from the,
residential
Right.
corridor as opposed to just from a parking garage.
correct, and to move from the garage if they
So
choose
both.
to,
Okay.
Or
And
they-
that's enclosed and
correct. They're concerned about security for people who choose to be, they'll be able to get into their car, out of their car, and across the alley, safe, secure.
I'm generally supportive of the project. I would like to see a little bit more energy on the High Street facade. I'm not really in favor with that tripartite sort of organization of the facade. I can appreciate everything that's being said at the street level. It's really difficult when you've got very narrow sidewalks and try to activate that with any type of anything but actual architecture. But perhaps there are ways, I kind of would love to see how you already have the facade sort of turning the corner. That corner is kind of an interesting corner, as you go on to turn on for the church entrance. So I think that articulation would be, I would love to see a little bit more energy with that. So how that corner wraps. Right now, it's just sort of truncated. It's kind of not my favorite. It would be nice if it wasn't just an extrusion, if there was something a little bit more, you know what I mean, activated going on
Yep.
between plan and section.
in there. So that makes it.
Energy.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time.
Thanks.
Thank you. You want us to take this back? Okay. I mean, I don't need to take it.
Oh, but I'm sure you can still check it.
Thank you.
I'm just throw other things.
Thanks, man.
Which brings us to UID 22-11-007B. Oh, no, we talked about that, right?
Yeah, that was, sorry, that's, there's one for the motion for the CPD and then.
Okay.
We're on. to the
Yeah,
next.
We are on UID 23-01-098.
Yes.
Okay.
And I would like to request a 2-minute break.
All right.
Okay, I will be right back.
Second that.
Thank you. Steph?
This is where it comes from.
I heard about the children. In school, or something.
Oh. It's the
Difficult way, all we had, two different ones. Yeah, I mean, I recollect. Oh, sure. Parking lot sign language, it doesn't matter. Your ornament, that's only walks to. Get out of here.
I just want to keep,
That's a whole separate problem.
it's, they think big complicated, but the bigger picture. And there's findings. I'm a little surprised too. Overseer. extent from our.
No, I know someone's gonna bring your pots and stupid eyes, they small set, and they must have beef, water.
We should start having like some talk here.
Well, wait.
That's exactly what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. So Rita.
Myself again. But I should stick around, right? 'Cause we-
Yeah, because we have some new business out there. Okay. Yes.
Then maybe not, what's that?
We're sharing. We love to share.
I just say, it's not even training.
What else?
Anyway, that's.
All right. So 1493 North Bay Street is located at the corner of West 9th Avenue and North Bay Street. The 0.59 acre site consists of 4 parcels, which are developed with a 2-story brick mixed-use structure built in 1920. Has a 1980 addition on the rear. A single-story commercial structure built in 1915, which was heavily modified in 1969, and a commercial structure built in 1943, which was heavily modified in 1973. The applicant is proposing to demolish all buildings on the site to construct a 6-story, 72-foot-tall mixed-use building with 105 dwelling units or 135 beds, 2,000 square feet of commercial space, and a 49-space parking garage at grade accessed from North Wall Street. The structure will include a mix of studio, 1- and 2-bedroom units, as well as street trees along West 9th, covered bike parking, a lobby, and amenity spaces. As such, the applicant is seeking conceptual feedback for variances to support the proposal and feedback on the conceptual design. And the proposed variances include to permit the proposed apartment building with a maximum of 105 dwelling units and an accessory leasing office with reduced ground floor commercial use, ground level residential use, which commercial does not occupy the entire length, 40 feet or 40% of the North High Street frontage of the building. And then also to permit dwelling units above the parking garages without adjoining commercial uses as specified, and to reduce parking spaces from 68 to 49 spaces. The applicant last came before the board in January 2023, where the board recommended commercial space on the first floor and stated they would support reduced parking to accommodate it. Members also expressed desire for consideration of the existing businesses and preserving the existing neighborhood fabric. Lastly, board members pushed for more dynamic building massing and elevations. In response to board feedback, the applicant reduced the parking area and count, added first floor commercial space, and added an arched entry on North High Street. Submitted conception materials included variance listings, site maps, site photos, site plan, floor plans, and elevations. And UIDRB staff has also included an aerial photo of the site looking north from the 1980s. So I'm looking at that, we start out with the variance listing here, and then moving into the drawings. You have your basic plan of the parking garage and the first floor. So you can see that commercial space has been added at the corner of West 9th and turning down onto High Street. There's also now a door in the middle of the High Street facade. And then you have that amenity space on the southern edge of the High Street frontage. I'm going to show you. garage. And then we have floor plans as well here for the residential units. And then we have some rendered elevations. This is the High Street elevation. And again, showing that arched doorway here, and then as well as the corner entrance. Here we have the 9th Avenue elevation showing the street trees. And then here's the west elevation along the alley showing the entrance to the parking deck. And then the south elevation. And then again, this is the photo of the site, which is outlined in red. This is looking north on High Street. So after review, the proposal is generally consistent with the recommendations of the University District Plan, but is not consistent with recommendations for the preservation of contributing structures. The plan recommends a site for regional mixed use, which recommends adaptive reuse and or expansion of contributing buildings, a minimum FAR of 1, max height of 72 feet, and parking at 0.375 spaces per bed for residential uses. The plan's design guidelines recommend preservation and rehabilitation of existing buildings, and that High Street continue as a mixed-use corridor with the densest development. Furthermore, the plan recommends that new construction utilize high-quality materials, building articulation, a high level of transparency on the first floor, street trees, art, and lighting that minimizes light spills. Lastly, the plan calls for a building's height and mass to be mitigated, the use of setbacks, quality architecture, and materials. So as such, planning supports the permitted uses and district limitation variances, but requests that the proposal incorporate an element of preservation as recommended by the plan. Planning requests that for the contributing building circa 1920 at the corner of 9th and High to be preserved and incorporated into the larger design. And then planning also recommends that the building be dynamically massed and articulated, with street trees along the North High Street frontage, a step back along the rear alley frontage above the 3rd story, landscaping, pedestrian amenities, and art murals on any blank walls. Additionally, planning encourages the use of townhome style units on the North 9th Street facade in order to activate that frontage. And planning would support additional height beyond what has been proposed if the proposal were to include preservation and other design elements requested above. And planning appreciates the inclusion of first floor commercial space and the additional entrance on the North High Street facade. And as the proposal develops, staff anticipate details on the materials, landscaping, and exterior lighting that addresses pedestrian activity while also minimizing light spill. Thank you.
Thank you. Would we like to go to any commentary from the visiting public before we proceed, or would you like?
Oh, I think he should present and then you can have the
Okay,
public.
that's fine. I need to swear you in though. You swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Very good. You like to add anything to the city's?
Belkis always covers it well, so I appreciate that. Thank you. After our last meeting, we really took the feedback. I think the overwhelming request was having the commercial space along High Street, so we have added that component at the corner of West 9th and High. As stated, we added another entry at High Street then, that's the vestibule with the archway. And then the rest of our first floor component will be for programming amenity space. Since our last meeting, I have had meetings with some of the business owners. I had one just this week. It was the first step, I think. They saw what we had introduced from the footprint, gave me some feedback on the space, some things that we could maybe tweak that would interest them a little bit more. So I would like to get your feedback on that today. But yeah, other than that, we're just going to continue the discussion and see what we can do here.
Okay. Is there anyone from the visiting public that would like to speak tonight? Come on up.
Good evening.
I do need to swear you in though.
Oh, yes,
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
yes.
Go right ahead.
All right, good evening. I'd like to thank all of you guys, including the commission, environmental staff that makes this possible. I'm a graduate of the John Glenn College of Public Affairs, so I understand the work that it takes to perform these meetings and allow public comment. So I'm standing here to urge the commission to reconsider the plans to allow Buckeye Real Estate to build another luxury apartment complex where several longstanding Columbus staples particularly Beer Stube. I and many of my peers have enjoyed those businesses, and they have existed since before most of us were even born, and I think that's really important. So before I get into the role that Beer Stube has played in my life as a young professional, I'd really like to speak to why these apartments are not a good fit for the area and the community. I am a first-generation college graduate, and the first generation of women in my family to celebrate my 21st birthday without children and a husband. And before you ask yourself why that's important, I'll continue to explain. So my first year at Ohio State was riddled with financial challenges. As my parents were in no place to help me pay for school, and I was living off of a very small savings I had collected in high school with my part-time jobs. There were weeks when even buying tampons was a financial burden for me. So as I sat in my dorm room and crunched the numbers for what my rent budget was going to be, continuing my education, it became very apparent that I could not afford to live around OSU, even with several roommates. While I scoured the internet for a place I could afford to live, I found myself overwhelmed with the number of luxury apartment buildings boasting amenities like pools and movie theaters, things of that nature. And many of these studios were priced at $1,300 a month. That is almost double my parents' mortgage for a 3-bedroom home in my hometown. I recognize the difference in Columbus real estate and home, but I think that's still an important comparison to be made. Some of these units didn't even have kitchens in them. They were set up like a dorm without the meal plan. There were almost no options for me, for someone of my background, to find housing within my budget that was close enough that I could walk to campus or find and take reliable public transportation. There were many times where the only option would be dropping out and moving back home to attend community college or start working retail full-time again until I had a better savings to live off. I say all this to say, who are these apartment buildings for? The wealthy OSU students have plenty of housing options, from Wellington to Lux 23, and the new apartment building that is immediately behind my current apartment that you all just approved that sign for. I can see that from, I wave to the construction workers every morning. The current plans to build this complex will not be housing students like me, who struggle with finances, or even average students from across the state who are attracted to campus for the charm and the city appeal with the in-state tuition. We need housing that Ohio residents can afford, not wealthy out-of-state students who hold no stake in the community or any consideration for the longevity of the units they occupy. Moving forward, I would like to take a minute to talk about the role that Beer Stube has played in my life. And while Beer Stube may be just another campus area bar to folks outside the community, to those of us that frequent the business, we know that there's more going on than that. Ray Oldenburg is a widely known urban sociologist who speaks on a term he coined as the third place. A third place is a public space outside of the home and work that allow for people to interact with friends, strangers, and members of the community. While the expectations that they find in the workplace or at home are not there. Without the presence of third places, life becomes a shuttle between work and home, which is detrimental to mental health and community. The Beer Stube has acted as my reliable third place after work and on weekends for the entirety of my life as a young professional. On nights when I wanted to get out of the house, but the libraries and the coffee shops had long been closed, I knew I could count on the Beer Stube as a reliable place to go. And I would find friendly faces and music that reminded me of summer with my grandfather rather than what most campus bars tend to play. The Stube is different from most bars in the campus area hangouts, as it allows for space to hold conversation without music too loud, and it attracts members of the community other than students, which I think is hugely important. It is intergenerational. There are young service workers, Gen X professionals, and artists that find community in the Stube. I have gone to the Stube and been offered free homemade meals in takeout containers. I have had conversations with folks decades older than me, teaching me about the old Columbus they used to know and the Columbus they see now. The community built at the Stube is nearly impossible to create without the years of community presence and the unique charm of its historic building. Columbus is rapidly losing its long-standing community staples, as we see with the closing of Goody Boys, the Shrunken Head, the Garden, Nita's on High, Catfish Biffs, and many more that it would take far too long for me to list. All of these just within my short 4 years of living in Columbus. Since I moved to Columbus as a student in 2019, I have watched Columbus transform from a city with more charm and character to a haven of chain restaurants and luxury apartment buildings. The community cannot afford to lose any more staples if we want there to be any longevity of its residents. Columbus has an affordable housing problem that will not be fixed by building more luxury apartments for students who have no intentions of staying here beyond the time it takes to get a diploma. The builders of the complex and those reaping economic reward have no stake in this community. There is no reason for them to build something meant to endure the test of time in Ohio's hard winters and community that is so needed during those times. The residents that need housing in Columbus are students, but they are also families. Student housing rapidly increases the cost of rent and other necessities, while almost no units are actually suitable for families. While this is a building that intends to really only have studio, 1 bedroom, and 2 bedroom units, that is very difficult for a family of 4 to live in. We need to encourage people who actually have stake in the community to invest their time and resources to improve these things, not another developer from across the country somewhere that crunched the numbers and chose this location for profitability rather than an actual interest in building a community. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. Seeing no one else, we'd like to come back.
Can I just address one of those comments? The no stake in the community part. I mean, I can tell you that our entire business is based around the University District. I'm second generation of Buckeye Real Estate.
We know you, Mr. Garland.
I serve on pretty much every voluntary board in the University District. I live in the district with my family. I'm raising one child there now with another one that's coming literally any day. So we plan to stay here. I feel very strongly about this community and seeing it thrive.
I would like to ask 2 questions that are prompted by your letter, and thank you for being here tonight. Public involvement is critical. You're in the area of public policy, so we look to you to the future to help with a lot of these issues. And just the 2 things that come to mind for me, and we all know that Columbus has an enormous affordable housing problem. In this complex, are you paying the city to not have to include affordable units? Or are you including affordable units here?
Right now, our approach is paying the fee in lieu. We've looked at it both ways. By the time I would anticipate this project being approved, it would be at the 60-80 level. And with construction costs right now, it's very, very difficult.
Yeah.
So
with
the
that
fee in lieu makes more sense than providing the affordable housing.
Yeah, and this isn't about your project, but it's relevant to what our visitor brings up tonight. And what it reminds us is that the city's program is not working. Because if there's no financial incentive and you're operating in a completely free market environment, the attempt that the city is making to get this to work is not working. The other question that comes up is the beer stube willing to sell, or are they under duress?
Are they well, I don't want to speak to their business. I don't know. I had a conversation with them this week. Like I said, they listened to our proposal for the project, but it was the first meeting that I had with them.
I want to ask a follow-up question to that, because you said that you met with the business owners. Did you meet with anybody else besides?
I have not personally met with the other business owners. I know that the landowner has. Again, we're happy to see what their interest is coming back to the site.
And then you had also said that they had provided feedback. Do you mind sharing what some of that feedback was?
A big thing right now is they have a patio. Well, the beer stube specifically has a patio, so that was a big thing that they would request. Obviously, that adds more space to their area. So we would be looking to add a patio down the side of West 9th if possible. It probably looked like an inboard, like a pseudo inboard outboard patio, because our building is only set back 5 feet, so there's not a whole lot of space. But I guess I would like to hear your feedback on the thought of that, of patio being down the side of West 9th Avenue. Another one was parking. They were just looking for a couple more parking spaces. And then other than that,
Was that they, the landowner?
the
or the
business owner
The business owner
would be looking for more parking.
who is the beer stube or some other?
The beer stube.
The beer stube. Okay, so you are in conversation about the possibility of them moving their
Business into, correct. The concern obviously is there's 18 months of construction. So it's figuring out what we could do in the meantime.
This is purely out of curiosity. The beer stew does not own their property, correct? Or
That's correct.
Okay.
I guess I'm a little bit sad that I didn't see, any of the existing structures from the place that faces High Street. You know why that wasn't incorporated in this design?
We're still early, and really the only thing that changed, we relocated that, the main entry when we provided the commercial space on the corner of West Ninth. So we added the archway that I think that was part of the feature of the existing building that they wanted to be reintroduced. I'm obviously open to more feedback if you have any insights on the design of how we can reincorporate that into this building.
I wouldn't support it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess actually I've got a question. Staff, one of the things that came out in the staff report was the element of preservation. So 3 buildings on the site, 2 of them are garbage. The one on the corner is the only one that really, I think, is significant in contributing. When you say an element of preservation, what are you talking about? Preservation of the building?
Yeah, we ideally would like to see preservation of the building and that incorporated into the larger development proposal. You know, for us to preserve, one facade isn't technically preservation.
Right.
So that's why in the staff report, I say the building from 1920, which is that corner building,
Right.
has the most articulation and details that are unique versus the other 2 structures, and it's on the corner, so.
Yeah.
That's what we're looking for, and we do recognize that there's that part in the back that was added on later, but ideally, we'd like to see that original building preserved.
I see.
Consistent with the plan.
One of my suggestions would be to see what the building would look like with keeping the recommendation that Belk has just said, and then also seeing if you could minimize the structure so that way the community space known as the beer stew could stay.
A lot of the value is in the land. I think what is missed with a lot of the community comment is that in 2015, the height district changed. If it weren't for that, most of the buildings along High Street would still be existing with those businesses. The underlying ground just became so much more valuable.
Yeah, I mean, I'm for on this one. I get the logic of the developer and building construction. There's a reason everything in the city is 5/1. I think planning has provided an opening to increase height as a way of offsetting. The problem is you switch from a reasonably economical construction type to a more expensive type. The minute you go above 6 stories, you're into cold form metal framing or reinforced concrete. And the costs increase. I struggle with it because I think while the land becomes more valuable, and I don't particularly care that we build over parking lots and old IHOPs, which is the previous project. The corner building, while not landmark quality, is a decent building, fabric building, and in the city, ideally, one would have a sort of mix of buildings of different periods that created a broader fabric. What's happening on High Street is the logic of development. We're losing kind of these smaller buildings, and we're getting lot line podium project, essentially extruded up 6 stories. And it's sort of changing the character of the neighborhood, and we see it with the Wellington number. So I realize it puts you in a tough spot. I'm not quite sure where I am yet. I would say I agree with Belkis that if preservation is going to happen, you keep the building where you don't. It's not a matter of reproducing an element. I appreciate the movement towards incorporating some commercial space in the building. And again, like, Elkis, do you recall the building immediately south? How many square feet of commercial space?
I don't know.
Very little, as I recall. I think it was kind of like your building it was about predominantly internal amenity space. I think it maybe was going to have a coffee shop that was open to the public, but it was not very much of the high street firms. It was going to be dedicated to leasable commercial space.
So, I mean, that's reasonable if he's kind of meeting the precedent of the building south. You know, it's reasonable to provide kind of similar.
But I'd also like to ask you, I'm just curious, what's the thinking behind having the amenity space instead of all commercial at grade? And where does that vestibule go?
So the vestibule will enter in and you can either, well, right now it's proposed you can either enter right to the commercial space or enter left to the lobby area. So the lobby amenity space would be used for leasing, package, mail, a lounge, coffee space, something like that.
So do you need that amenity space to have the building function as residential? Do you need some of that space?
I think you need some of it to make it attractive because the competition has ample amenity space. That is something that we have not really proposed in this, but I think obviously some of the programming you need a package room, you need a mail room, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, since it's at such an early conceptual level, I would say the presence that the vestibule has on High Street sets up an expectation. And it's surprising then to look at it funnel back to a parking lot. So the expectation that major entry, it looks to me like you're going to the housing. That's where mail is dropped off and residents come there separately to get access to materials. But the problem is the doors to go home to your unit are not located in that site in the middle of the block. So it's odd. The entry to the commercial space is really off the street corner. So the building on High Street doesn't really read in a way in which the public would expect to understand the signs, the signification of what's being seen.
I think the challenge was the elevator location. If we keep it in that central area, it's going to cut right through, 4, 5 floors of.
Yeah, I understand that. But I'm wondering if like the places that people come in and out of the building all the time don't deserve more signification, the reading, the legibility. If I'm going to visit somebody who lives in the building, how do I know how to find them, right? And what I would do if I was going to somebody who lived at that address, I'd go right to that door. Because that's the marquee on High Street, and then I'd be confused about how to get there.
Seems like the way your plan's set up, you'd be better off coming in both corners of the building and not the middle, right?
Exactly.
I agree with that.
Yeah, exactly. And if the big door in the middle of the street is a good idea because you're bringing us to something that we want to go to, like a coffee shop, a different signage, it would be a different way of handling that.
Well, originally, as you remember, we had it proposed to have the lobby entry at the corner of 9th and High, which from a resident standpoint, I think is the best. That's where the most foot traffic is going to be coming from the university.
But it's not where your vertical circulation is located.
But that's correct. But if we move it further south, you're getting further away from, I imagine a lot of this traffic is going to be going north on High Street. So it's a further entry point.
I guess what I'm saying is the front door to the building that should be indicated with a legible marquee should be closest to where you want people to circulate.
Well, it's the only entry in and out. So if you're coming from High Street, you'd be circulating through that entry.
Am I reading it correctly that the stair and elevator are at the southernmost part?
Yes.
Right there?
Yes,
So I would
correct.
expect the front door, the mailbox, the service elements related to entry would be at a double threshold at that site, a windbreak and so on, and that's where it would be located. So when
At the south corner along High Street, is that what you're saying?
the elevator and stairs are.
I guess what I would note is if you've seen sort of the recent developments, generally the first floor lobby is pretty generous. You come in and usually there's a leasing office. There's possibly a meeting space for the tenants or leasing office. There's lounge furniture to sit and wait for tenants.
But that's not what we're seeing here.
Yeah.
If that's what your plan is.
That is, yes, that
But you
is the
see when you
plan.
come in through double doors and then there's a solid wall.
So
is what makes.
the
it really hard to
vestibule
rate
should
it.
show that there's obviously an entry into the amenity space from there. So you walk in and then you would go left into the lobby and amenity space.
So when I read amenity space, I thought maybe it's workout equipment. I
No.
didn't know what was intended there.
Correct.
And it's not, look, read your plan, right? So I come in through those double doors and I'm heading to the wall of parking. And until you start to tell me how I turn to the left to enter the space, I'm more than happy to have you dedicate the real estate to.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought I had said that. So yes, you would be entering through the center of the building in the arched vestibule. You would enter, then and turn left into which would be a leasing area, offices, study area,
Yeah.
a lounge.
And
And we haven't done it. We could draw a fit plan up for this.
So if you've got all of that designed and you know that you need that much space, then if you show it, I'll understand
Sure,
more
absolutely.
clearly. However, I would argue that by moving that vestibule, you're acting as though there's a logic of symmetry to the facade that's important. I don't see it. I would say you can get more commercial space. You can move the door somewhat closer to where the public circulation is. Design exactly what you need for what you're calling amenity space, which I now understand is lobby, entry, mailboxes, front of dwelling, that is the access then to the public circulation. And then you get more space that you can rent, which obviously is valuable to you. You see what I'm saying?
I do see what you're saying. Like you said, the project to the south of us has 24 feet of their high street frontage dedicated to it. Right now, we're at 40. So we've already surpassed that.
But you have too much, basically, and it's costing you.
So are you recommending that we shrink down our commercial space?
No, I'm sorry. I misunderstood. I thought you were saying that you're comparing the amenity space for your building to that. of
No,
another.
I'm comparing the commercial space.
So I would suggest you would want to get as much commercial space as you can. It's advantageous to you as a
Right, but,
businessman, but it's also great for High Street, right? If you've been listening to other things we've been saying, we like to have commercial activities that animate High Street, that give people reasons to go there, is to see things behind the glass walls.
the High Line at 9 was delivered in 2017 and half of its commercial spaces are still vacant.
That's
What's
The
the price of
uncommon,
it?
the uncommon is
Yeah,
the
that's-
same way.
What's the price of it? That's what I want to know. You know, I mean, I don't think it would
I
be
mean, it's
vacant.
market rate, I guess.
Well, it wouldn't be vacant if it was affordable.
I think price is beyond the board's purview.
Yeah.
It is
That's-
definitely
I don't
beyond
think
the board's
cost and
That's right.
price is something. that
It
we
is
can
definitely,
comment.
which is why I'd go back to the street front guidelines, the
Well,
desire to make a livable.
The
city
other
more
problem
viable.
too is if I add more commercial space, then I further reduce my parking. So I have more requirement for parking for the commercial space, and then I have less parking for my residents.
But isn't KB's primary point the motivation for that central vestibule? Am I,
Yeah, I can't read his plans because there's not enough information, and that's why I'm challenging it. And I'm even more confused by the answers that I'm getting. I mean, draw what you have, and when we look at it in the next round, perhaps it'll make more sense. Because right now, you have a vestibule that walks into a wall. There's no way to get from the vestibule into the space you're describing. So you just have to draw it correctly. But then that leads to a discussion about what makes good urban life, because our purview, by virtue of our guidelines, is aesthetic and based on the design guidelines of a good street life. And so we're making a suggestion. You can take it and see how it works in your business plan. I'm not convinced by the logic that if you add another, 200 square feet of commercial space, you're going to find yourself in a parking problem, because frequently we find that parking variances are better for the social activity of the area.
Right, but,
So-
okay.
That's not something that I would be particularly concerned about. So I'm just telling you where I stand on
Sure.
that.
And I appreciate that. And at the next meeting, I'll make sure that we have a fit plan for the lobby space, so that you can see that we need the 2,500 feet or whatever, 2,500 square feet is proposed.
Yeah, I also want to say in the context of these conversations, because our visitor made the time to come and read the letter that she sent to us in advance, that again, while there are economic issues around housing that I think we're well aware of, and we have a major problem in the city of Columbus, that's not our purview on this board, that we can't evaluate or support or not support buildings based on the economics of the housing itself. Doesn't mean it shouldn't be brought up, it doesn't mean it's not something that should be considered at length. We don't have the authority to decide this. So are you getting what you need tonight?
Are there other comments from, Tim, Amon, Harry,
No, I'm good.
Lori?
Yeah.
I do like the fact that, I'm sorry, did I cut somebody off? Sorry, Laura, go.
Okay, well, I mean, I really appreciate the fact that we have commercial on the project. I really enjoy, and I think I mentioned this before, sort of the articulation of the existing building that's there in the corner. I sort of echo the sympathetic nature of trying to make a project work, but we are losing a bit of fabric here that is irreplaceable, and once it's gone, it's gone, and we're replacing it with cookie cutter facades that it's starting to kind of diminish sort of the energy and the beauty of what makes High Street valuable. I mean, if there was, we see a lot of projects in, other districts that in some way maintain the integrity of this facade and incorporate it somehow within the building. I know that's not an easy factor, especially with the fact that you have such constructions with parking, right? The other items that I think we're really struggling with, what is this commercial space and how is it used? And while I appreciate the fact that a potential future tenant would love to have some patio space, but it needs to work within the context of the elevations. The elevations are just an extrusion of the plan. There's no energy there that is allowing for us to see how you might incorporate the existing building, how you might incorporate a patio. I realize this is all conceptual, that it's not been worked out yet. To KB's point, so your drawing was done quickly and it wasn't well articulated on the drawings, how to get from a lobby to the vestibule. And while we can't really talk about it, I also question one elevator with 6 stories and 105 units. With that elevator going down, and how do those students or whoever lives on the 6th floor get down? Because that would be a challenge. I just think it just needs a little bit more thought out. I know this is a first pass, but it's difficult to comment on it when it's really not worked out. And this has a long way to go to get to a point where I could get behind it.
Acknowledging the early stage, and I know that you came to us for feedback, but could you share with us consideration that you have, in terms of the staff recommendation for the preservation element of that corner building, what consideration have you made of it? I mean, what's your...
I guess if I'm understanding correctly, saving that building would eliminate, a large portion of the site that's 4 parcels right now. If we're saving that very front corner, the existing building, then I lose an eighth of the site. And
How
a
far
lot of
back does
density.
that addition go that is non-contributing? If you go around the corner? And of course, it's go down 9th.
So it stops here, and this is the addition. And then this is the original house.
In the front.
Yeah, I would agree with Lori about what her comments were. So, excited to see more development of it.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Keone, Lori?
I'm sort of sympathetic because I think the applicant's in a tough spot. I get the logic of development, construction, and what I was saying to Lori is the sort of purview of the board in terms of preservation is frankly a little mushy. We're encouraged to encourage applicants to preserve, but I don't think we have the authority necessarily to require it. So I have to think about, I mean, so that may be a business. Let's talk about that. The only building of any architectural merit is the corner building, which has no value. You are right, it is about an eighth site. I get the hardship from this development perspective. So I gotta think through. In general, I think I appreciate you made a good faith effort to put in commercial. I think if it's as much commercial as the building to the south, then I think that's fair. I am certainly in favor of variances to reduce parking. I wouldn't expect the commercial space to put the burden on you in terms of parking. I mean, High Street, there's parallel parking, there's side streets. I think I get it, and I support like parking for tenants, but I don't think parking for customers is necessary. So I don't know. I think under new business, we should talk about preservation.
I would be curious what you would do to the plan if you were to salvage that building on the point. I mean, I know it's going to be very disruptive, but is it possible to develop the rest of the site? And in terms of what you're losing, I said, well, then you just go a little bit taller, but that gets complicated because now you're shading this building that's on the north side of the.
Well, if I go taller, as Keone had mentioned, I either have to use steel or I have to add another concrete podium, which is cost prohibitive.
So I have a question and trying to work with everything. The Ninth Avenue facade is not that important. It's a part of the building, yes. Is it preservation of the building or is it that facade? And it's the facade that we're enjoying. So I'm just curious about any
Facade.
precedent for that.
No, I think it's not just the facade design, I think it's the fabric. And I don't feel strongly about the fact that keeping that piece of fabric after so much has already been gone. Keone spoke earlier about the fact that we're just watching the city change from something that had some human scale to the ubiquity, the same old 501. And so, you're hearing the collective frustration. It's not your project. You're doing what you see everybody else doing. But it's the direction that the city is going. And I think it's hard for people in sitting there to recognize that a lot of cities that have great historic fabric as a whole, not just individual monumental buildings or individual buildings with nice brickwork, that they work for decades and a long period of time to establish regulations and criteria from their city so that when developers come along and do something potentially innovative but change the fabric, they give something back significant. And that's written into the codes and to the ways in which other cities' design development offices work. And Columbus has historically not had that. So we remain a city that doesn't have the same visible beauty, qualities of historic and organic spaces. It's the nature of who we are, and it makes it difficult for me to hold on to that particular piece when probably this building is going to contribute more to the area, even though I feel the same frustration you all feel, that we're getting more of the same over and over and over again with nothing particularly exciting or generous or intelligent or beautiful as novel architecture. Basically, developers with their architects are coming on base copying what they've seen before, and there's a generic quality. And I'm ranting now at 6:30, but it's how I find myself in a period of frustration when we have artifacts that not only bricks and mortar, but also cultural spaces that have served communities, and we just watch them fall after the other.
Any other new comments? Do you feel like you have direction that you need, Justin?
Somewhat, I guess. Yeah,
Good luck.
okay.
A lot of variables.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we've just kind of gone a lot of different directions on if the building is important, if it's not, if it's, I guess what other elements could be included in the design of the larger building. I guess for the zoning though, so I have two variances, parking and the high street frontage. I would like to hear a little bit feedback on that.
Okay, so even for building amenity space, that's obviously not strictly commercial, so that's, you need a variance for that, correct?
Yes, the code says you need 80% to be commercial. I believe 20% that can be used for circulation, like stairs, elevators, lobby entries.
So the variance would be to go from 80% to 40%.
Correct.
I mean, I'd support it, both. I think they're both, I think, reasonable given the nature of the project and the site.
I would support both as well.
I would agree.
I agree.
I would not agree with having a larger amenity space than a commercial space. I would be more for having a smaller amenity space and providing more opportunities for business
I
owners.
agree with Emma, and I think it's quite a difference to go from 80 to 40. You might be able to convince me of 80 to 60, but that's
I
a
think the
pretty big.
precedence was set though at the project to the south, which is 24%.
Yeah, but this site is taking away more commercial space than the prior one was. So you're removing commercial space of a larger dimension, giving back less.
There were, what, two businesses on the other site?
On the site that you're speaking
To the
of,
south, there were two businesses.
I don't remember what was there.
There's the Army.
There's the Army, Navy, and Lucky's.
With the other. Hit me up for the
Lucky's, which was a bar there for a while, and then Cousins Army Navy.
So regardless of the precedent, and I don't remember voting on behalf of their percentage, on this case alone, I wouldn't go as far as 40%.
Okay.
And then I would be willing to give a parking variance. If, as long as the tenants still had places to park and the commercial was blockable, so.
Based on high street bus access and side street parking, I would also be willing to give a parking variance on behalf of more commercial space.
Okay.
This is staff. I have one question regarding preservation. I think, Justin, I think there may be some push and pull of who may support completely redeveloping the site and who is like, that's a no-go. I need to see, X building preserved before I could support. Could we maybe go down the line and share how we feel about the preservation element? Maybe we could start with KB and.
On this particular site, I don't feel very strongly about preserving that building.
Okay. Carrie?
I'm torn. I mean, I agree with everyone's comment that it's unfortunate to have one, albeit small and somewhat unspectacular building, recognizing it does provide some level of fabric to the community. But for that to kind of render the balance of the site undevelopable. But I question the undevelopable part in the sense that there's a way to do it. I mean, it's just, so I'm just sitting here wondering, like, is it possible to keep half that building and then.
No, it's developable, it's just the return on the investment. The reason we get 5/1s is it provides you the biggest bang for your buck. You can, I mean, it's the economic market of the city, right? Like you could develop that site any number of ways. You could do a series of linear buildings, kind of like Old Star style apartments were being done, but it's not that, it's the logic of development. I mean, and this is not limited to Columbus. There was an article in the New York Times 2 or 3 weeks ago called America the Plan, because what we're seeing everywhere is 5/1s. I mean, the problem is you're right, the value of land is higher, but it's not high enough where it encourages other types of systems, right? We're not New York City or Boston or San Francisco. So right now, the sweet spot is a 5/1. And, a 5/1 with parking and.
It was also true in Rome in the 19th century. The difference is they built better buildings. Look at Barcelona, look at Torino. They're all the same. It's that same fabric size and density. The difference is there were very different architecture.
I guess they're used to walking around. They didn't have to drive a fucking car.
True, and they're walkable, that's right. And the scale of the street is smaller, even with the higher building. So theoretically, less daylight to the street, and yet the street is a much more desirable place. We're not going to become those cities.
Yeah.
What are we going to become is the question.
If we're still going around, I would.
We are.
I would not, I would not insist on the preservation of that building. I just want an excellent building there.
I would be more in Carrie's position. I'm more torn because I'm thinking of, as a business owner myself who's in the university district, I crave those places that have that character. I'm in a new build underneath of existing apartments on top, and I'm in a beautiful space, but it doesn't have the character that a lot of these old places do. So I'm more in tune with saving the building for now. But I think it's also because this design to me doesn't really seem appealing to have it replaced.
And last but not least, unless you're going to chime in again, but I mean, I have to agree with Mr. Fleming that it is developable, but it doesn't give you the biggest profit margin or the ability to do the project. I struggle, is it, the best gem on High Street? No. But it is a building that deserves at least some type of understanding of how it potentially could be preserved. Could I be swayed? Perhaps, but the architecture would have to be so good. And I also know that the 5/1 and making that architecture so good is probably going to put you out of your price point to build it. So it just comes down to the numbers in developable area. And then it also comes down to beds and parking spaces, right? It's a balance. I said that before. And if this building is a part of that balance, then that's part of the challenge as well. And I'm sympathetic. I work in this type of an environment all the time, and I understand what your goals are and what your needs are and how you're going to deliver this product of this parcel. So I'm sympathetic. I just really make it so that I can say I can part with this building.
Okay.
That's your challenge.
Challenge accepted.
You think more clear, Kristen?
Sorry.
Do you feel clear?
Yeah, that helps.
Want these?
Sure, absolutely.
Good luck with your little one.
Yeah, good luck with your
Thank
next
you.
child.
We spent Friday evening in the hospital. Thought we were going into labor and then got discharged Saturday, so I was hoping to just make it through today. So this baby can come out.
All right.
I left my Friday wide open.
Your wife appreciates that.
All right, thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Szymanski back in, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Quick rundown of staff approved applications.
So they're kind of self-explanatory, but I wanted to note that with all of these, I added links to either the COA or the stamp drawings to get context to what I reviewed and approved. And then I also added what item on the staff approval list this approval pertains to. So for example, the first one is for 175 frames. That's related to that all graphics can be approved, and then also them having gotten a certificate of appropriateness from the HRC. So that's one example, but as you go down the list, you'll see those updates. So I just wanted to give some context to that. But if y'all have any questions about it, I'm going to answer. So.
I don't have questions about these, and I really appreciate the links. The question that I would ask refers to comments that have been made before. I think Keone said last time, is there anything that can be done to try to address the over signage problem in the area? So aside from our role as UABRB, is that something that's being discussed in the city at all?
I haven't heard anything. Within the planning division, all of our we have design guidelines depending upon which area of the city may correspond, if it's a historic district or a design review area. Areas that aren't within design review areas or historic districts, the only time, planning would comment on it is if a variance is needed or if the parcel's being rezoned. Other than that, it would fall to the graphics code, which is under the Department of Building and Zoning Services, and the graphic folks in that department.
So what's the process for changing the code?
Well, right now we're updating our zoning code comprehensively for the first time since 1954. So
And can we write letters of appeal?
Yeah,
What would be the way to
the
proactive?
there's definitely a public engagement process for, it's called like Zone in Columbus is the name of our zoning code update. And I know that there's going to be or already have been maybe opportunities for engagement on that. I can't recall the exact opportunities off the top of my head, but
Would you be able to find them and send them?
yeah, absolutely.
Because I would certainly be willing to write a letter, that would include some evidentiary graphics of the area. It's so all over the board, signs attached to buildings, signs in yards, and as I've shown you before, 1996, 2 signs duplicative right on the corner. Why? They say exactly the same thing. And a lot of them get vandalized by students. It seems like an area of relatively easy change, easy for me to say, but it seems like something that could be done without too much pushback that would make a difference.
Yeah.
It's ugly.
That would be really helpful, because the commissions aren't getting a lot of specific information, and anything you can provide to us would really be helpful.
Yeah, and I know they're just getting started. I think the first school year that, everyone's working on this. I know that a new staff person was just hired to assist with the zoning effort, and they're specifically for like public engagement and that type of activity. So, but as opportunities come up, I'll make sure to send them to you all, and I'll send you at least, I can send today or tomorrow, a link to the webpage for the zoning effort where they post updates. So I can at least do that right away.
Yeah, just for that.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I had a quick question. How do we deem a place historic?
Yeah, so, well, there's 2 words. So one word is contributing. So that means that it's not historic, but it's 40 years or older, or older than 40 years at least. And so that's where you have a building where it's not on the historic register by any means, but it can, I keep saying fabric, but if our neighborhood's a quilt, it's a square in the quilt, and it contributes to the vibe of the neighborhood. So that's contributing. And then historic is like, it's on the register, and there's certain, factors that you need to meet to get apply to be on the historic register. I'm sure Jacqueline can speak more to that than me. But that's the difference between historic and contributing, and that's why we're careful with our wording. So that corner building that we just looked at, it's contributing. It's by no means historic.
Got it. Have you seen the film Chinatown?
No.
There's a great line by John Huston that says, all things get value if they hang around long enough. Politicians, prostitutes, and old buildings.
Okay, I was gonna lead a line that we got it.
But with the staff approved applications, just for housekeeping, we do need a motion and a second to have them approved or to have them entered into the formal record. So someone,
I second. Tim,
was there a motion?
I second, yeah.
Tim moved.
Okay.
Tim.
Great. Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Ms. Gunzelman,
Yes.
Ms. Jones.
Yes.
Ms. Parker.
Yes.
Mr. Reed.
Yes.
Mr. Suplet
Yes.
and Mr. Singh.
Yes.
Thank you. And unless there's more to be said about the staff approval list, we can move on to the items of new business, which is a reminder of our purpose and purview, and then our policy on what's required, in regards to application materials. And starting with our, purpose and purview, I have,
You gonna pull a three though again?
I have the code here, which outlines the board's purpose and purview. Here we go. And so there's just a few sections I want to point out that, and obviously you guys can pull up the code on your own and read through this, but duties, the duties of the board are to, and explicitly outlines, to preserve, protect, and enhance the urban environment and neighborhood characteristics of the university district. And so then it goes on to talk about, taking actions for certificate of approval, which you do every month, to review applications for zoning change, variance, or special permit, and then to develop and promulgate the guidelines pertaining to compatibility and appearance as necessary to clarify development objectives and enhance the development guidelines herein. And then another section that I thought was appropriate was the section for certificates of approval. So, what do you look for? And section C talks about basis of review and issuance. So the review board shall hear and decide applications for certificates of approval. Obviously, a certificate is issued by the review board, stating that it's in compliance with the standards of the code and is consistent with design guidelines as outlined in this chapter and approved by city council. It says that you can consider, conceptual proposals as well, and that design review, this is important, shall be based on the following considerations. 1, the provisions and standards of this code. 2, the design guidelines as referenced in, this section of code. And then 3, other code and regulatory requirements as may be applicable. So, I thought those were important sections. And then it talks about the design guidelines, and that you're to use them as basis for review. But this is important. The design guidelines are intended to serve as flexible policy framework for decisions by the review board. And so that's where you'll even see this in my staff report. Sometimes I'll say, although XYZ isn't consistent, ABC is a mitigating factor for the thing that's not consistent. And that's why in this instance, we could support it. So that's where that flexibility comes in, and that's where, you all have that flexible tool as well. It's not black or white, but all of you have, you sort of help mold and shape that, which is where this flexible policy framework comes into play. So that's where the purview is, and you all know this, but I wanted to specifically call it, that's why we have to go by design guidelines. The design guidelines don't talk about rent. They don't talk about who's, to ask, what are you charging? Or, who's your tenant going to be? Those aren't really appropriate questions. Our hearts may want to know that, and our hearts may be with that. But we have to go by the design guidelines, and that's sort of the basis of our review of those.
So I can't ask him if he was using the city's, if he's gonna pay off the low end, instead of following the city's guidelines for a percentage of affordability, he's gonna pay it off. I'm not allowed to ask him that question.
I mean,
I feel like you could ask, how are you meeting the city?
Yeah, yeah.
But you can't editorialize perhaps,
Right.
I mean, you can
But you can
editorialize
ask-
the policy, but.
Right.
You had helped me
Well, I can't,
kind of
I
frame
can't,
something about case.
I can't assess, so I can't make a decision based on that
Right.
criterion. But can I know that? And then the question, I guess, is objectivity. But
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you can ask within reason,
Yeah.
like, what the intent is, you just can't prescribe.
correct.
Right.
Like,
Of course.
I don't think it's unreasonable, if someone shows up with like, a bunch of commercial space. I feel like I could say like, just curious, who do you anticipate would be a kind of tenant?
Right.
Yeah.
And they say, oh, I'm gonna put in a bar, it's like, oh, no, you're not making a.
Yeah, that's not okay.
Right.
But in my staff reports, I have said sometimes like, oh, the intent awning is a student or whatever, and then you could say, oh, you want more students? I don't want that. Like,
Yeah.
you should be marketing to this type of clientele. Like, that's where you get into non-appropriate territory.
But you could ask if any of these projects, for example, had any affordable housing.
Yeah, yeah, and then they would
Or-
answer, and then you would say, thank you, and then move on.
And that helps.
And with Peerless, when Michael Wilkos and Kathy Fox and others came and spoke, a significant part of that project was how they were gonna do 20% affordable housing,
That's right.
and then later it didn't pencil. So they changed after we approved it, but we were interested in that component
As
of
a
the
part of
project.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and certainly, they open themselves up if they use it as part of their argument. If they present a project, and they're like, oh, right, this is an affordable housing project, isn't that great?
Right,
I
right.
mean, that point, I think you've opened the door.
Mhm. But you can't like comment one way or the other whether, that you support it or not. It can't factor into your basis for review. And there's another detail that was brought up about, preservation and our design guidelines do clearly support preservation. So like in the staff report below, there's this basis for staff recommendation. And it's, it can be long, but I think it's helpful. But in there, there are guidelines. So this under design principles, page 56 to 63, the general guidelines state promote preservation and rehabilitation of existing buildings that contribute to the district's diverse character. So that specifically correlates to historic preservation and the preservation of this, what it says, contributing fabric. So I just want to note that there are guidelines that speak to that, and there's a full historic section as well for historic buildings.
Plazas, courtyard seating, and other pedestrian amenities are encouraged, particularly where, what does it say, Vinnie?
Where are you?
Bottom
down
of
here.
this.
Oh,
Where
yeah.
larger building setbacks are in place. That sure sounds like High Street,
Mhm.
where we were discussing a parking lot.
Yeah, so I would say, this is helpful to skim through at least, or if you are in discussion and you're really like, man, we're really torn on, parking or preservation, skimming down while others are maybe speaking and looking at these, because I do take the time to note, is it consistent with this guideline or not consistent? And it's pretty clear. And then even in areas with like FAR and the parking, I take the time to put in that detail, so just noting that it's there.
Are we allowed to comment on any of the sustainability aspect of a building or incorporating that into the design? Is that something we can speak on?
Yeah, that's definitely, something that can be a comment.
Okay.
For example, this is are you looking at a green roof or, you have a lot of dead asphalt space here. Could you incorporate planters or plaza space, or it just depends on the development proposal, but that's something that can be considered.
Okay.
Any questions though on the purpose and basis for review, anything like that before we move on to the next piece?
I wonder about how much weight the reserve has. It's sort of in there and in your matrix, it's one of the number of factors, but I think like if you look at the last case, like whether or not you allow that, you require that building to be preserved, might sort of decide whether the project is feasible.
Oh, I agree, and that's why it's a recommendation, right? So at the end of my staff report, I always list what our recommendations are, but there's certainly by no means requirements. And I think too, it's so hard, right? Theoretically, you'd want to preserve everything, but you have to go site by site. So if there are other mitigating factors that mitigate the loss of contributing fabric, like a fantastic, beautifully designed building, or other elements that, contribute to the community, that's where you have that balance in the play. But I think as a division, when we looked at this site, we saw that corner building, we saw value in it. And as a division, not just me by myself making these choices, but management, I was directed to have that as part of my stuff.
That makes sense. And I think I think you all have kind of clarified your position with regard to preservation.
Yeah.
In previous recommendations, you talked about elements of preservation, but I think now the recommendation is more in alignment with what we understand preservation to be.
Yeah, because like some other, like, I've seen like facade activities and things like that in other cities, but for us, when we talk about preservation, we talk about the whole building.
Okay.
Because it's not like, if you're just preserving a wall, it's not true preservation.
Right.
Something to be still.
Apologize, I'm not.
That's okay.
That's
That's okay.
With the speaker tonight,
Yeah,
they're supposed to stay within 3 minutes, aren't they?
they are.
I did not, I failed to, that's
And
fine.
also she read her letter that we had, so it might be good to advise when people say they're gonna come, thank you for your letter, do you have anything new you want to add, or to let them excerpt from it? Because, yeah, that was at least double the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And for that kind of thing, I would look to the chair to referee.
Dropping the ball.
Brian wasn't in the room, or else we could put it on him too. Right? Or
But
wait.
the next piece is division policy on required application materials and conceptual versus action items. And, I think this is important because it can get kind of murky. But I did want to bring up our certificate of approval application. So this is what applicants see and this is what they read through. And in looking at page 3, there's a whole section about required materials. And really in our code, our zoning code, is just like law, references the application. So the code doesn't delineate what is required or not required in terms of materials, but our COA application does. It doesn't delineate between conceptual proposals or proposals for action, but it does call out, photos, cut sheets, which are the manufacturer's brochures, and then it talks about drawings, that drawings have to be dimensioned and notated. We don't look for 11 point, some of this we don't always look for, but, new construction exterior buildings require elevations, floor plans, site plans, and perspectives of renderings. Graphics require elevations, details, and renderings when applicable. And then for demolition and landscaping, and then variance or rezoning. So it's all listed there.
So the portion where we've typically required sections for building sections.
I was
for
gonna
new
say,
construction,
sessions is really.
is that just a
It's-
not written rule, but that's just a historical, because
Yeah, sections aren't on here, but it is
where I
something
read that,
that,
so, but, okay.
yeah, and so I wanted to point out, so if an applicant has a conceptual proposal, we generally require, what is enough to get your idea? So if they say, well, I have a site plan and a building extrusion with just massing, I have to take that to you all because it's a conceptual review. This is just my initial idea. I haven't gotten very far, but I just want to see how it's landing. I can't require them to add more materials because it's a conceptual proposal. If they say, hey, Belkis, I have a Google Street View of the site and I want to know, I need some sort of professional drawing or conceptual proposal. But if they have something like a site plan and one elevation, that's sufficient. It's when we get into proposals that require a vote where I'm looking for all of the drawings that are here on the COA application. And admittedly, sections aren't on there. But if they come before the board and the board's like, I'd really love to see a section of X, Y, Z, then I would expect them to provide that the next time around. But this is our guiding document.
Yeah.
Could you send us a copy of the application?
It's on the UIDRB website. You
Oh,
can download
okay,
it.
thank you.
I think the other thing too, I always get a little challenged with is most of the times they'll present an elevation
Yeah.
along a street facade without any contextual information. that
Oh, like
needs
what's
to
going
be
on? Yeah.
Right or left or even behind it.
Mhm.
And I think for me, that's a really important thing to see
Yeah.
on how the building fits contextually within the context of where it sits on site and it's to its adjacent properties. There's, because we just don't want these buildings to look like they landed from outer space in the middle.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's not a vacuum.
So
Yeah.
it's got to have some type of context, especially in the district that we're in.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
No, I think that's a really good point.
It doesn't really
And I
help.
think as staff, that's something that all of our staff across our various boards and.
So for that last application that we had, I saw the south elevation and I was like, what is this? It's just a blank wall and I didn't even know, because I was looking at Google, right?
Yeah.
And it's not there. So I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that had been approved and it's being built against another building. I didn't know that. So I had no idea. So I was like, I had to piece that one together as I was kind of looking at stuff. So.
Okay. And that's something I can do better as staff is.
Yeah, I mean, it's just
asking them,
because
prompting them.
Obviously, you don't have to.
I have 2 weeks to work with them before.
I guess my interpretation of it is the application requires certain things. And for conceptual, when there's no action required, they can submit whatever. And we start a discussion. As part of the discussion, we say, okay, we're listening to your idea. We want to help you, please provide this, and that to help us help you. And so it seems like we have some flexibility to say, we would like within reason
Oh,
to see
absolutely.
these things.
Absolutely, yes.
So, I mean, I think the issue came up a meeting or two ago because the applicant wanted action on a zoning variance with very little information.
Yeah.
And, conceptual, there's no action, so fine, show whatever you want to show. And sometimes frankly, less is better than more.
Yeah.
But I think it's more, if you want action on a variance, then you can't just not provide it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree on that. And also too, if the board, something I always do is if the board requests X, Y, or Z, let's say they request a section or what have you, when they come the next month, I look through and I'm like, oh, Sam, I saw that you don't have a section, the board requested that, can you provide that? Or, for example, one application we saw tonight, they didn't provide floor plans and the original materials to me, and so I asked them for floor plans. I got them yesterday, but at least I had them and I could pull them up so the board could see what was going on behind the glazing on High Street. So I always try to ask and follow up and say, are you meeting these board comments, and how did you update or provide additional materials to reflect that?
Well, because one thing, I think they did adhere great with those charts, but I think we've struggled with this in the past is even when we're looking at the CVS, I mean, they wouldn't be like, we have this number of beds, we have this, and to me,
Yeah.
those numbers are important and easy to put down in the chart. Any architectural plans that have number, to see that, because to me, that case today was very simple. They had the parking, it was there, they showed the calculations, you could say, yep, we know they're not just we're meeting code and we have that, you don't have something in front of you.
Yeah, the matrix.
And I remember our time at East Franklin, they were tracking all that shared parking with the 400 West Ridge.
Oh,
And we
I
had that,
know. Yeah.
and that sheet, it's not the same, but those type of Excel, what I don't want you to, but telling the applicant, hey, if you're gonna come forward and ask for a parking variance, because even to me, one of the things, I know I recused myself of that one, but I looked at the materials, I questioned where it said the parking was at 0.36 because they had commercial space, and aren't they required to have commercial parking?
Yeah.
So that their parking ratio that they put in there isn't even actually correct because they're not accounting for the commercial. And those are things come out in charts when you're looking at it. It makes it very easy to see.
Mhm. Absolutely. And that's something I can request moving forward. Any other questions or comments or concerns?
I just wanted to say, it's really helpful that you pull up Google Maps while
Yeah,
we're
that's
doing this. I love that you're able to kind of show that and that you're able to take us down that street because my memory isn't the greatest when I'm trying to think about that. And
I'm a visual
Yes.
planner. I'm a visual
Same.
learner in person, so
Yes.
I wouldn't be able to speak to anything if I couldn't see what was going on in the street either.
And then I also wanted to say, that, you know, thank you so much for also reading through the items and then also helping us move along when we tend to get stuck. And we're having trouble kind of moving forward. So I appreciated that. And then I also just wanted to say thank you to all of you for, you know, being patient with a young lad over here. Who's learning the odds and ends and making sure that my vocabulary is up to where it needs. So you're doing a great job.
Yes.
And if anything comes up, this doesn't need to be the only time you will comment with me. So email me, call me. I was open to chatting and having a conversation.
I'm sure everyone has realized that because you are very accessible and that's appreciated, truly.
I'm a public servant.
So,
All right. Is there anything else or Carrie, do you
Nope.
adjourn and call the time?
I move we adjourn.
Okay, great. So the time is 7:10.
Have a wonderful weekend. It's almost on.
Still good.
Oh, you were at a meter?
Yeah.
Oh,